Okay, chairs, would you turn on your video and do a mic check? Chair Cabrera?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I'm gonna turn
Mic
on
check. Mic check.
Great. You're good. Okay, Sergeant, you could start the recording. And Owen, you could give the opening.
Good afternoon, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management. At this time, would all panelists please turn on their video? Please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. That is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. We are ready to begin.
Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon, and I just ask everyone to bear with me. I scratched my cornea, and it's been a very difficult couple of days, and I'm struggling with it. I'm grateful that we might be able to get Councilmember Cabrera as a co-chair. Extremely grateful. Thank you so much, Cabrera, for always showing up and being helpful. And I apologize to everyone. I'm gonna be on as much as possible, but might be disconnected because of just needing to like put something on my eye. But good afternoon. I am Councilmember Antonio Reynoso, and I am the chair of the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management. Welcome to this hearing on Introductions 1942 and 1943, sponsored by Councilmember Powers and myself, to create minimum number of organic waste drops off-site and community recycling centers throughout each district in New York City. Thank you to Councilmember Powers for working together with me on this important package of legislation, and for allowing me to be a part of the legislation. I just want to note that Councilmember Powers has thought about the concept and allowed me to be a partner with him on this issue, and I'm extremely grateful to him for that. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic in our city has been both tragic and financially devastating. The residential collection of organic waste and temporarily halted on May 4th, 2020, with no plans to resume service until at least June 30th, 2021. Food scrap drop-off sites were also temporarily suspended with no indication of when these sites will resume. E-waste curbside collection was suspended, and hazardous waste special collections programs were suspended at least 1 year. For 2021, these program cuts amount to about $21.1 million for curbside collection, $3.5 million for community compost programs, $3.5 million for e-waste curbside collection, and $2.1 million for hazardous waste programs, and $2.1 million for recycling outreach, including Grow NYC's food scrap, drop-off, and green market textile programs. I understand that we must achieve budget savings, but I also know that we cannot remove access to recycling programs and still pretend that we are going to achieve zero waste. Some of these programs are New Yorkers' only opportunities to dispose of waste safely and legally. There are disposal regulations for hazardous materials and electronic waste that will be significantly more difficult to follow if these programs are suspended without replacement. Organic waste discarded as refuse also increases our greenhouse gas emissions and reduces our access to compost and valuable alternative energy. All of this is vital to our entire city, and most profoundly, our economic, environmental justice communities that have been feeling the effects of our lack of progress, and some who have lived side by side with transfer stations should be given every opportunity to reduce the amount of waste that they are sending to landfill. We cannot allow a short-term fiscal crisis to leave us unprepared for the far larger crisis of climate change. I look forward to hearing the SNY's testimony on how we can build on these bills and advance recycling in New York City. I also want to hear from advocates about how we can build on the work they're already doing. I hope that we can work together to create a system that will actually reduce our waste. I would like to ask Councilmember Powers to give an opening statement, and would like to just, to to however much power I have as chair, empower Councilmember Cabrera to from now on just take on chairing this committee. Again, thank you so much, Cabrera, and thank you guys for bearing with me as I read with one eye. I want to use that as the excuse as to why I wasn't reading well, but thank you again. Thank you. Councilmember Cabrera, Councilmember Powers.
Thank you. I'm Chair Reynoso. I feel your pain from here, my friend. So I hope you're doing okay. And we certainly, I think everybody understands it and recognizes that you're probably not in your best condition to chair today, but thank you for your leadership and partnership on this issue. I know you care deeply about our recycling and composting system here in the city. On waste issues, you've been a leader here in the council since I've been here. You also sit next to me, so we get to talk about this in person when we do see each other. But I'm thrilled to join you in the chair in introducing the Community Organics and Recycling and Power Act, what we're calling the CORE Act, to make a clear commitment to composting and recycling in New York City and to engage New Yorkers to help make their city a better place for future generations. I want to thank Borough President Brewer, who I see is here today, testifying in support of legislation, as well as my colleagues who have signed on and the Save Our Compost Coalition, who have fought for this and have held town halls and have been doing great social media and other things to make sure that New Yorkers know about it. And even just in the last few days, we've gotten hundreds of people to sign a letter of support that adds their voice, regular New Yorkers, to this effort. I see some of my constituents on here, so I want to say hello to them as well. We're going to be hearing my bill, Introduction 1942, which will preserve neighborhood composting and recycling. It will allow for the recycling of organic compostable materials at community drop-off centers and preserve a more affordable part of the current composting program that's facing proposed budget cuts, even if as we may suspend the curbside collection component to this. Specifically, it required Department of Sanitation to set up 3 drop-off composting sites in each community district by June 2021, which is the end date. We certainly want them to do it sooner. It requires that sites be set up that are easily accessible, including for people with disabilities and close to public transportation, and crucially requires department to establish an outreach and education effort so communities are aware of the sites and are informed of the services that they provide. The legislation will ensure that New Yorkers will still have a way to be green and smart about their waste, as well as create more equal access across communities and recycling sites. And I will actually give the department credit here because they are the ones who we went in a conversation with me about this, sparked some ideas around ways we could do more community composting. Some of us, I live in Stuyvesant Town, have it right downstairs. Unfortunately, not right now, but we want to make sure every New Yorker has access to composting and recycling. So even as we are in a pandemic and face the challenges to recovery, and fight a fiscal crisis, we want to make sure we have still upholding our commitment to mitigate the impact of climate change. And if our goal here my goal is to get to zero waste, we cannot see the whole city sit back at a time before any composting program was set up. So I think this is a priority for both myself and the chair, Reynoso, and many others, and the borough president as well. So I want to thank them. Thank you, Department of Sanitation, for being here. And again, thank the speaker and Jason Goldman and all the staff here for helping organize this hearing today and make sure that we have a voice around this issue today. So thanks to everybody, and I'll look forward to hearing the testimony. Back to you, Chair Cabrera, I think.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, Chair. Just before we begin, I'd like to go over some procedural items, if that's all right.
Yes, please.
So I'm Nicole Bean, counsel to the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management of the New York City Council. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are called on to testify, when you will be unmuted by the host. I will be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called. I will periodically be announcing who the next panelist will be. We'll begin with testimony from the administration, followed by testimony from Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, followed by public testimony. The first 3 panelists for the public testimony portion will be Eric Goldstein, followed by Carlos Castel-Crook, followed by Justin Wood. I will call on you when it is your turn to speak. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask a question, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you in order. We will be limiting council member questions to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to wish Reynoso a quick, Chair Reynoso, quick recovery and prayers for that as well. So with that, Nicole, I'll turn it back to you for the swearing in.
Thank you. Now I will call on members of the administration to testify. Commissioner Garcia, Deputy Commissioner Anderson, and Assistant Commissioner Anderson. I will now deliver the oath to the administration, and I will call on each of you individually to record your answers. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions? Commissioner Garcia?
I do.
Deputy Commissioner Anderson?
I do.
Assistant Commissioner Anderson?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And my best wishes to you, Chair Reynoso. Always a pleasure to be able to give testimony before your committee. And good afternoon to the rest of the members of the City Council Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management. I am Catherine Garcia, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Sanitation. I am joined today by Bridget Anderson, Deputy Commissioner for Recycling and Sustainability, and Gregory Anderson, Assistant Commissioner for Policy and External Affairs. So thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. Before addressing these bills specifically, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the challenging position that we find ourselves in as a city during this time. The COVID-19 pandemic has put immense stress on our city and our communities. The administration has had to make some difficult cuts to the budget to continue core government operations and to devote resources to essential safety, health, shelter, and food security needs. This includes deep cuts to the very programs we are here today to discuss. As I mentioned at our executive budget hearing last month, no one is more frustrated than I am to see these programs be reduced, suspended, or eliminated. But it is a necessary step for our city to take due to our current budget reality. Now, more than ever, we are seeing the importance of supporting communities and giving New Yorkers the tools to continue to sustain and improve their neighborhoods. I believe that the spirit of these bills endeavors to do that, to provide local, equitable opportunities for New Yorkers to reduce waste, to fight climate change through daily choices and behaviors, and to bolster a culture of resource reuse and reinvestment locally. Now more than ever, we need to empower individuals and communities to keep our neighbors healthy and safe, to help our city grow and thrive. We look forward to working with council to identify and implement creative approaches to achieve the goals laid out in these bills. I am here today sober about the challenges we face, yet optimistic about our combined passion to overcome them. Despite these challenges, we can work together to achieve our zero waste goals, and we can do so by empowering individuals and communities to make change. For the last 5 decades, efforts in New York City to conserve resources, reduce waste, and achieve zero waste have often started at the community level. They've been led by residents, teachers, gardeners, nonprofit organizations, block associations, and small businesses. These efforts continue today in neighborhoods across the city, ranging in scale from large to small. At the beginning, recycling of newspaper, cans, and bottles happened because of the hard work and dedication of volunteers collecting materials from their neighbors or working at community drop-off centers. It is only as a result of their work that the city enacted the landmark Local Law 19 of 1989, which created the city's mandatory curbside recycling program. Today, this program is a cornerstone among the city's sustainability programs, and we continue to achieve year-over-year growth in the amount of mixed paper and metal, glass, plastic, and cartons collected. At the Department of Sanitation, our approach is twofold: to support, enrich, and empower community-based efforts to recover resources for beneficial use, while also ensuring that all New Yorkers have access to the tools to contribute to the citywide zero waste effort. At times, these two approaches can create healthy conflict, inspiring thoughtful conversations about the merits of a program's breadth of scale versus depth of engagement. We believe that both approaches are necessary to achieve our goals, and that we must take a both and approach, not either or. Organic waste is particularly suited for community-based recovery and beneficial use. When composted, food scraps and yard waste become a nutrient-rich soil amendment that can bring health and vibrancy to neighborhoods, from street trees to parks to community gardens. DSNY created the NYC Compost Project in 1993 to rebuild our city soils by providing New Yorkers with the knowledge, skills, and opportunities they need to produce and use compost locally. The 7 New York City Compost Project partners located in all 5 boroughs operate food scrap drop-off sites, process collected material, and distribute finished compost to public greening projects around the city. They also partner with community groups for stewardship projects and provide technical assistance to local gardeners and at-home composters. Since the New York City Compost Project was started in 1993, we have trained more than 800 master composters, worked with thousands of volunteers, and supported more than 225 active community compost sites and gardens. It is thanks to their passionate community composters that we were able to build the momentum that helped us launch and expand the curbside composting program over the last several years. Before COVID-19, DSNY supported the operation of 175 food scrap drop-off sites across all 5 boroughs. DSNY's support included funding for staffing and site operation, technical assistance, collection services, and local and regional processing. Many of these sites were facilitated by our compost project partners or by Grow NYC, and they had a dedicated base of thousands of weekly users. While the funding cuts in fiscal 21 will dramatically reduce the support that we are able to provide to these sites, we hope that independent community support will allow at least some of them to resume as our city begins to reopen. And we will continue to provide training and technical assistance using in-house outreach staff to support our community composters and gardens across the city. We expect to resume financial and operational support for these partners and sites in fiscal year 2022. Another example of DSNY's community-based approach to zero waste is Donate NYC, which helps New Yorkers give goods, find goods, and do good. By donating and reusing goods instead of discarding them, New Yorkers can greatly reduce waste, conserve energy and resources, save money, and help provide jobs and human services for New Yorkers in need. Donate NYC also provides vital support for New York City's reuse community, helping nonprofit organizations and local reuse businesses increase and promote their reuse efforts. Thanks to our Donate NYC partners and other providers, New York City has more than 700 clothing and textile drop-off locations located in all 59 community districts across the 5 boroughs. While some of these locations may be temporarily closed due to the COVID-19, we anticipate that many will resume collection as the city and state continue reopening. For some products and materials, especially those that are inherently hazardous or dangerous, extended producer responsibility policies offer the best approach towards safe and sustainable management. While flawed, the state's electronics recycling law envisions a network of recycling options for New York residents funded by electronics manufacturers and retailers. We continue to have discussions with the state DEC regarding the convenience standard and other elements of that law to prove its effectiveness. Producer-funded take-back programs for paint and pharmaceuticals have also recently been enacted at the state level, and we look forward to their implementation in the coming months. Lastly, in this time of financial uncertainty, I would like to highlight 2 successful programs that operate at no cost to the city. Refashion NYC was conceived in direct response to the city's 2005 waste characterization study, which identified textiles as a component of New York City's residential waste stream with a high potential for reuse. Through Refashion NYC, apartment buildings, nonprofits, and commercial establishments host clothing donation bins that are serviced at no cost to the city by nonprofit charitable organizations, who then resell these items to fund their social services. The program was possible because of years of partnership between DSNY and reuse organizations within the city. eCycle NYC is a parallel program for apartment buildings to collect and recycle unwanted electronics. eCycle NYC is supported by electronic producers through the state's electronics recycling law, which requires that producers pay some or all of the cost of such programs. I will now turn to the 2 bills that we are here to discuss. The first bill, Intro 1942, would require the department to create at least 3 food and yard waste drop-off sites in each of the 59 community districts by June 1st, 2021. Each site would operate a minimum 20 hours per week and would be located in a geographic area that is easily accessible and in close proximity to public transportation. Intro 1943 similarly would require the department to create at least 3 community recycling centers in each of the 59 community districts by June 1st, 2021. Like the drop-off sites, each recycling center would operate a minimum of 20 hours per week and would be located in a geographic area that is easily accessible and in close proximity to public transportation. The bill envisions that the recycling centers would accept material that can be recycled or reused but are not collected curbside. Such materials may include electronics, textiles, furniture, and other durable goods, and certain hazardous waste as practicable. The community recycling centers would be co-located with the food and yard waste drop-off sites in the previous bill. I want to thank the primary sponsors of these bills, Councilmember Powers and Chair Reynoso, for introducing them and for convening this important conversation today. I support the intent of both bills to provide local community-based reuse, recycling, and composting options, especially for materials that do not already have a curbside collection program. I look forward to hearing from the many advocates and activists and other New Yorkers who will testify today and share their passion and commitment for the community-oriented solutions to zero waste. And I look forward to working with the council to have further discussions on how to achieve our mutual goals. However, given the city's current dire financial situation, I cannot support these bills as introduced. At a time when many, including the council speaker, are calling for even deeper cuts to agency budgets, including ours, it would be impossible for DSNY to comply with a new programmatic mandate of this scale. For Intro 1942, I agree that the city should offer a robust network of food scrap drop-off sites in particular neighborhoods that lack curbside composting service. Such a network existed before the COVID crisis with 175 food scrap drop-off sites operating across the city. When the funding for curbside composting and for the New York City Compost Project resumes in July of 2021, I look forward to working with the City Council to resume both programs, build participation, and achieve success. Intro 1943 would create an entirely new network of community recycling centers. While I am certainly concerned about the cost of such an initiative, I also have serious concerns about the feasibility of siting and the regulatory requirements that would apply. I look forward to hearing more from the sponsors and from others who have joined today to better understand the intent and scope of this legislation. As we look beyond the COVID-19 crisis, I want to reassure the members of this committee and all New Yorkers who are watching at home that we remain committed to our zero waste goals. While the budget realities have caused great and unfortunate setbacks, they also offer us an opportunity to reflect, to plan, and as we recover, to implement programs even better and more innovative than those that were cut or suspended. I look forward to ongoing conversations with the City Council and the passionate advocates and stakeholders who care deeply about these issues in the coming weeks and months. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Before we begin the questions, we had some trouble capturing your answers to the oath on Zoom, so I'm going to re-administer that for all 3 of you. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions? Please
do.
speak loudly.
I do.
Commissioner Garcia? Deputy Commissioner Anderson?
I do. I do. Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Assistant Commissioner Anderson?
I do.
Thank you. I'll turn it back to the chair now.
Thank you. Finally got unmuted. Thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony. And at this time, I know I have some questions, but I want to let my colleagues and especially the sponsor of the bill, Powers, begin with their questions. And I know that Nicole has some instructions.
Great. So after Councilmember Powers, I will call on council members in the order they have used the Zoom raise hand function. Please keep your questions to 5 minutes. The Sergeant at Arms will keep a timer and I will let you know when your time is up. Throughout the question and answer period, we will continue to call on council members to respond. Chair, you're beginning with Councilmember Powers. So Councilmember Powers.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the testimony and thanks for all you're doing right now. I know you're a lot on your plate, no pun intended, right now when it comes to what's happening in the city. So thanks for all you're doing. I hear your comments related to, I guess, both bills, but particularly 1942. Is the concern right now from the administration standpoint the cost of running it, or is it alternately, or maybe it's both? Is it the cost of running it and the fiscal situation of the city, or is it logistical concerns and rules and regulations that pertain to putting the program together?
Certainly. So for the food scrap drop-off sites, the concern is primarily financial. For the recycling centers, depending on what products or materials, there could be some regulatory challenges. But the other just logistical challenge is finding locations in the city in terms of siting that many. But I mean, the overall thing right now is like, unless we get some funding from the federal government, there are likely to be more cuts rather than expansion of any programs.
And what is the cost for Intro 1942 estimate? What would be the cost to put that in place?
So for the food scrap drop-off
Yeah,
one, it's, you know, the 175 sites that we run now, I believe it costs us about $3 million a year.
Got it. Which is, I mean, I am as wide-eyed as anybody else when it comes to cuts, but the $3 million is, you know, for us, I think a very small fraction of the entire puzzle here, and then also, you know, clearly keeps some of our goals in place. But if we were to receive federal aid or other aid through borrowing or something else, is it fair to say the administration's position on that might change if the fiscal situation changed for the city?
Oh, I think definitely, particularly for like the food scrap drop-off program or the compost project and some of those, if we end up with enough money, you know, I think the conversation's very, very different. But if we don't, and unfortunately, I don't think they're likely to pass anything federally before the end of this month when we need to adopt a budget, you know, it's just a really challenging financial time. So I go up and down on where I think the Senate will land on whether or not they'll be willing to provide us with the type of resources, the amount of resources we would really need to keep moving this forward. But you're right. Normally in a normal year, that budget would be a rounding error. The Office of Management and Budget is pushing everyone to go find every rounding error that we possibly can because of their concern about the revenue stream.
I got it. Well, we hope if there is revenue, I mean, we will fight, I know, myself and the chair, to get it restored anyway in this budget, but even understanding the fiscal situation, if there is more funding, I think we'll certainly be looking to partner with you to find ways to bring this back. The budget proposed, you know, the cuts to the curbside organics and community composting for 1 year during fiscal 2021. Can you just tell us the cost of per ton of disposing organics versus refuse?
So the cost is about a $4 difference per ton between organics and refuse. However, the way the refuse contract works is that because there are fixed costs in it, you don't get to fully net out the cost of refuse disposal.
Okay, and so would there be near-term savings achieved at the city if organic material is diverted is diverted from our refuse stream?
No.
No. Okay.
That's why it's a savings. If it actually saved me money, I probably would have gotten to keep it.
Right. No, I believe that's true. what is the amount of organic tonnage that was collected for fiscal year 2019 and prior to COVID in 2020? What is the amount of organic tonnage that was collected curbside? And then how much collected at the drop-off sites?
Sure. I see if Deputy Commissioner Bridget Anderson can answer that because I don't have the historic numbers in front of me.
Sure. For the drop-off sites specifically, there were about 3,000 tons collected. For the curbside program, it was about 50,000 tons. I think you had asked both questions.
What was the first answer? Sorry.
About 3,000.
3,000. Okay. And if people want to divert their organics from landfill, what are their options?
So their options really are what they can do either in their homes or their backyards at this point in time.
Okay. And our community garden composting program still allowed to operate?
They have not been yet in terms of the green, if they are on green thumb property. I don't believe that the Parks Department has reopened those at this point in time. For anyone who is planning to reopen, we have provided guidance to people about, and that is on our website, about how to do it safely. But I believe that many of the sites are on Parks property and Parks has not yet permitted reopening of those. Those will be able to reopen, and we think there are some community gardens and such that rely on primarily volunteers and can actually compost on their site who will reopen and do that. But we just haven't quite gotten into that phase yet.
And has Parks given you any sort of guidance on when they'll be able to accept drop-offs again?
No, I think that we're waiting a little bit until at least phase 2.
Phase 2, okay. And what response have you received from Community Compost Program regarding the budget cuts?
I think as you would expect, I think they're very, very disappointed. I've heard from many of them, and I mean, I follow the petitions. I know how people feel. I mean, the reason we've been successful at all in moving this is their real passion and commitment to this program. So I think there's sort of an overarching sadness.
Time expired.
Okay.
Okay, that's my time. I just want to ask maybe one or two more questions, if that's okay, just from some of the ones we have here. I talked about community gardens. Advocates have suggested to us that community gardens have received grants that enable them to process compost. Would DSNY factor that in if this is passed?
So you mean private philanthropic grants?
Yeah, I believe so.
So if they're able to raise money on their own for some of the processing or other issues that would come from that, you know, we will provide technical support. We will provide outreach. Those are sort of what we have still in our toolkit at this point in time.
Okay, just a couple more and then I'll hand it back over. Thank you, Chair Cabrera. What can be done to make it easier to process collected organics locally rather than, as I understand, we transport them upstate, right? So rather than transporting them upstate, what can we do to make it easier to process collected organics locally?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things is that the biggest challenge we have about processing it locally is finding a site to do it on. That has been the ongoing issue. It is pretty intensive in terms of the amount of land use that you need. You know, we have also tried to partner with the Department of Environmental Protection so that we can turn it into a biogas, the food scraps. But for doing, you know, more normal compost sites that you may have seen, you need space. And many of the New York City Compost Project folks are under a lot of pressure for the sites that they're on even now, even without budget cuts.
Yep. Okay. And if we pass this bill or we came to an agreement and we had funding for it, would you be open to hearing community input on the compost sites that were chosen if we were doing 3 per site? And how do you imagine that process works?
Right. No, we'd certainly be open to working with all of the stakeholders in this. We usually do try and have those ongoing conversations. We have a lot of interactions with many of the people who are on this panel all the time about where those locations are. But, you know, definitely near public transportation has been very successful in certain areas. But sometimes we get it wrong and we have to move it. You know, it doesn't, the uptake isn't there. And then we've changed locations to see if we could get better participation at a different location. So we are really willing to be flexible.
Is there a formal process you envision, or is it ongoing conversation, dialogue, or is there a process by which folks would be able to nominate or discuss sites that are in their community?
So oftentimes it is, they will nominate sites, but then we go through a process in terms of whether or not that makes sense, given can they support the site? Do we have the right resources to support the site?
Okay, I'm going to stop there just as a respect for everybody else who's waiting to ask questions. I may have a few more later, but I'll also have to run to a budget meeting shortly. But thank you to Chair Cabrera for giving me the time, and thanks to Commissioner, and thanks. I just want to say thank you to all the folks who've been working with us on this. I am encouraged to hear that if there's some funding, you're open to doing something here. I think we should find the funding this year. Like $3 million is just so minimal, but understand that we have to be a little. This is a very difficult year, but we'll continue to talk about ways if funding becomes available to do that. So thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Powers. Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Cohen, followed by Councilmember Chin. Councilmember Cohen.
Starting time.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you, Commissioner.
Nice to see you.
I know we've talked about, really how heartbroken we are about the situation in terms of composting. I'm concerned about what you think, sort of the long-term impact on and getting people to participate, because, you and I, you came up to my district, we kicked off curbside collections in the district together. But getting people, like, it's a culture change and a way of thinking that this is really going to set us back. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what you think the impact will be in terms of, if and when we get back to being able to do this, how much, we're going to lose in terms of people's participation.
So, I mean, I'm very cognizant of the experience we had after 9/11 when recycling was canceled and came back, and then came back slightly differently, that we will lose ground during this particular year. And I know that means that we are going to have to think really strategically around how we plan for bringing it back, to make sure that we are re-engaging with everyone in the community. But we also need to work together about, like, what is our overall path towards getting to a mandatory program, and making it so that, we are invested both in making sure that people understand what to do, but also that they are doing it.
Can you talk a little bit about, you probably did and I missed it, I apologize, where we were at in terms of participation, either both curbside, and do we know how many people were using the drop-off sites?
So we don't have counts of that. Probably the best is what Deputy Commissioner Anderson said, which was about 3,000 tons in the drop-off sites and about 50,000 tons in the curbside program.
But that doesn't sound, relative to how much trash you move, it doesn't sound like that much.
It is still a small percentage. Obviously it's not available to everyone, and it was voluntary. And so, we did a lot of different outreach, including some campaign style outreach things, door-to-door education, but still it has been one of the challenges with the program is getting people to participate. So we have some folks who are very, very dedicated and some folks who were less dedicated.
I'm just going to give, I think I've mentioned this to you, and it's in housing and buildings, but I have a good bill that would require new construction to build infrastructure in the building for organics collection. I hope that after COVID we get to hear that bill. I would love your thoughts on it. Thank you, Chair Cabrera. Thank you very much.
Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Chin. Councilmember Chin.
Starting time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony. I have a couple of questions. Out of the 175 sites that you talked about, do they include all the farmers market site in the city?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's unfortunate because that's where a lot of my constituents, I see them on the weekend dropping things off, dropping their food scrap. And it's like a ritual and we definitely need to find a way to continue that. The other one thing is that, have you looked at Governor's Island? Because Earth Matter is out there, and when we tour Governor's Island, like during the summer, I mean, they have a really big composting program out there. They compost all the food scrap on Governor's Island itself. And right now, they still got a lot of land. I mean, it hasn't been developed yet. And so there might be an opportunity to really utilize those space to expand composting program. I mean, you could take the food scrap, like tugboats or whatever. But that's someplace that I think we really need to look at, especially in the short term. And my third point is on the business improvement district throughout the city. I think they are an important resource that can help us with community drop-off site for composting, because they're part of the community. They work with small businesses, but they also work with residential property owner, and they have the people, the staff that can manage some of the drop-off site. So I think we should really reach out to some of them, especially the one that represent a large residential area, and see if they could be a partner in this time when we don't have the budget. But they might be a good resource to help us.
Yeah, thank you, Council Member. I mean, I think that those are two really interesting points about using Governor's Island. Might take us a little time to figure out how to get things to Governor's Island. I don't think we could use tugboats. But
well, you should talk to Governor's Island. I mean, I can help you. They have more ferries, and you could borrow the tugboat from the South Street Seaport Museum. There's ways to get it there, but it just is a resource. I mean, they got a lot of space, and they're already doing composting. So yeah. I think it's just great, that we can use them to help us. And what about the business improvement district?
So the business improvement districts, let me think about how to, we will reach out to them about how that might be something that could be useful. I need to think about it a little bit about how they would fit in. But I think that you're right. They are always a resource to us in anything that we do, whether or not it's on waste or cleaning. They've always been central to how we think about ensuring those commercial corridors stay in good shape.
Yeah, I'll be happy to reach out to the one in my district and also with Governor's Island. So let me know if you need help with that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Chair Cabrera, seeing no more council member questions, should we move to public testimony?
Yes, please. Thank you. And we want to also recognize that we were joined by Councilmember Brannan. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your testimony. I know these are difficult times, and hopefully we will get help from the federal government. If we don't, these are going to be very difficult days.
Very difficult.
On anything we have ever seen. So it is my hope that we do get that help. And so with that, this wraps up the administration's testimony. I will turn it over to Nicole, who will go over the procedure for public testimony.
Thank you. We will now turn to public testimony. I'd like to remind everyone that unlike our typical council hearings, we will be calling individuals one by one to testify. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will call on you after 3 panelists have completed their testimony. For panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant at Arms will give you the go-ahead to begin upon setting the timer. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. We'll be starting with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. Following her testimony, the next panel will be Eric Goldstein, followed by Carlos Castel-Croke, followed by Justin Wood. Manhattan Borough President.
Thank you very much. I am Gail Brewer, Manhattan Borough President, and I certainly want to thank Interim Chair Cabrera, certainly Councilmember Powers, and I hope Councilmember Reynoso feels better. I am a co-sponsor of both Intro 1942 and Intro 1943, and I fully support establishing drop-off centers for New Yorkers to recycle organic and inorganic materials in the 59 community districts. I don't need to tell you that from my perspective, these centers are crucial to ensure that the city continues toward zero waste by 2030. These centers in every community will expand recycling in an equitable way, opportunity to drop off food scraps, e-waste, and textiles into districts that have not yet been served by organics. I also ask the members of the committee to consider the following recommendations as you work on the passage of both bills. In the districts, home to public housing often exists, and at least one of the 3 required community recycling centers we think should be sited either within a development or a location that is accessible to the NYCHA residents. The NYCHA location would also accept food scraps, I hope. When determining where to establish drop-offs, sanitation needs to work with NYCHA's really wonderful sustainability team and with the residents under consideration before decisions are made. And once a location that serves NYCHA is selected, I hope that everyone would work on education and outreach. Second, the community centers can also serve as collection sites for disposing pharmaceutical waste. As you know, we have a very active Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board known as SWAB. And that particular committee analyzed the reach of state legislation, which allows retail pharmacies to register as pharmaceutical waste collectors and install collection boxes to take back drugs and other unused controlled substances. You know, that's a problem if you keep them around. SWAB found that almost no pharmacy in Manhattan had installed collection boxes, nor were the pharmacies on site aware of their store's ability to do so. SWAB members could only confirm one pharmacy in Union Square that had a box. So with the shortage of collection opportunities outside of annual National Prescription Drug Take-Back Days, which we all participated in, and periodic safe disposal events, this committee should work with the Sanitation Department and the Department of Health on the state level to consider including pharmaceutical waste as part of these centers. Finally, I want to reiterate, as you know, the importance of education and outreach. That's what's always needed. New Yorkers need to know about the centers in order to participate. And as this wonderful city council continues to work out the details of the FY21 budget, I know the challenges, I really urge that there be sufficient funding for alerting the public about community recycling centers and encourage recycling in general. Thank you for the support of recycling expansion, organic collection throughout the city of New York. And I hope we can pass Intro 1942 and Intro 1943. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Power.
Thank you. Thank you, Borough President. Nice to see you. Thank you as always for everything you do in my district in Borough. You talked a little bit of education. First of all, I like the suggestion around public housing, and I think it's a great one. It's one we'll look at, so I appreciate that. And also, like even where I live in Stuyvesant Town, like having an organized neighborhood where you can really, kind of coordinate is extremely helpful to us. But for people that live outside of big complexes and where it seems so people don't know what even composting is, and some people, I think in my district, how easy it is, how simple it is. And then also some logistical hurdles to getting people what they need to be able to do it. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations like how we together educate constituents in, let's say, Manhattan or anywhere else about how to do it, and also how to ease people into it and make it easier for people to be able to do it? I have blocks and neighborhoods in my district where it seems like people, should look to ship. I'm sure there is a map of usage somewhere, but where it seems like there's just a tremendous opportunity to increase participation.
I hate to keep bringing up the schools, but it's like, that's how we started recycling, was the kids started doing it and then they asked their parents why they weren't. So as you know, it has not been a great success at the schools. And we started out on the Upper West Side, 8 parents, 8 schools, I remember it well. And then it spread citywide, but has not gone really well. So I think to answer your question, again, this is a tremendous loss if we don't continue it. But I think we have to focus on the schools and make sure they're doing it and the kids participate. We had at some point, you know, volunteer teacher, volunteer one, guidance counselor, somebody. We tried to get them some extra funding. That didn't work out. Working with the kitchen staff and then working with the kids to have some kind of competition. You know, you got to work on your lunch. You got to make sure that it goes into the right bin, etc. And I do think that's the way to start, to be honest with you, is to get the schools to do it right. They're not doing it right now.
And is the hardest hurdle for the schools, I imagine, is just getting the students to be able to sort out and the staff to be able to.
Yeah, because as soon as you compromise a bin, as you know,
right,
then the end result is not good, and the land use end result company is not going to take the scraps. So that's been our problem, without getting into so many specifics. I think Bridget knows this only too well. And that's after a lot of work. I mean, there was work put into this, but it just takes more. And it, you know, so I don't know how else to say it. I know my block does it, you know, so it's very haphazard as to which block or which development. Obviously, NYCHA would make a huge difference. I only talk about the rats. If you get rid of organics in a positive way, then you're not going to have rats. And that's where I wish we could have more conversation, because that's a good education, a good public relations. Don't talk about organics, talk about rats. And that's where you get people's attention. To the answer to your question, schools and rats.
Yeah. All right. Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thanks for testimony.
Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Lander.
Very much, Chair Cabrera. It's good to be with you. And I'm going to ask this question of the next panel as well, but I would love the Borough President's take on it. Borough President, you know, obviously I represent a district like the one you used to represent in the council, with a lot of people so eager to participate in the organics program. And so like you, we've taken a kind of, you know, coalition of the willing approach. Let's get people where they're excited and go with a kind of voluntary energy approach. And on the one hand, I've loved that. You know, my block, a lot of my neighbors really like doing it. They're so sad about the program being lost. But I wonder a little now that we're looking at the fact that we've built a program that doesn't actually save us money because it's not at the full scale that we need for the city. Do you think, I mean, we got to do what we can in this year's budget to preserve and save pieces of this program, but as we're looking longer term, do you think we need to consider options that that are a little less coalition of the willing and a little more like it becomes mandatory, it's the law of the city, or I don't know, what are we going to do to build a program that gets out beyond, you know, a few pockets where people love doing it, because the only way to get to zero waste is something with a fuller adoption.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I'll tell you also, if you get to a certain point, and I'm not allowed to ask questions, but that would have been a question for the city, because there is a demarcation where it ends up, we save money and not cost. And so what is that milestone? What is that metric? So that would be another question that I'd love to get answered. I think IBO has a number. I don't know what the city's number is. So, and then of course we have the whole issue, which is also controversial, about the ways in which going down the sink is another opportunity, which I know DEP doesn't often like. So I think all of this has to be considered, because we cannot have these heavy loads, and we need it for composting. I mean, there's just so many ways that organics needs to not be in the landfill for cost reasons and for rats, which is always my issue, and just for the composting. So it really needs attention. And as you know, the worst thing to do is to stop the program, because then people, out of sight, out of mind. So I'm very concerned about it. And I wish that we could, hopefully at least this interim measure could be instituted, but it needs to have a whole year of thought process from commercial to schools. The schools are a challenge. I mean, we've been trying for 8 years. And so they need a real heavy support mechanism of some kind too, because that's 1.1 lunch plus breakfast. That's a lot of organic.
Thank you.
Do any other council members have questions for the Manhattan Borough President? Seeing none, next we'll hear from Eric Goldstein, followed by Carlos Castel-Crook, followed by Justin Wood. Eric?
Starting time.
Thank you, Council Member Cabrera, Powers, Lander, Borough President Brewer, and best wishes to Chairman Reynoso. My name is Eric Goldstein, and I'm the New York City Environment Director at the Natural Resources Defense Council. One of the often overlooked facts about environmental history in New York City is that going back to the beginnings of the modern environmental movement, it's frequently been the city council, not the mayor's office, that's instigated positive environmental policy changes for all city residents. That's been the case throughout the decades, and it was illustrated again last year when, under the leadership of Speaker Johnson, the council passed landmark climate change legislation. Indeed, on the composting issue, the city council wisely began steering the city in the right direction almost a decade ago when in 2013 it passed Local Law 77, creating what became the largest voluntary residential organics collection curbside program. And that same year it passed Local Law 146, establishing a SMART program for separating and collecting organics from restaurants and other food services establishments. Even back then, the council understood that composting organics was critical to ending the city's global warming emissions and recycling trash into useful compost. The de Blasio administration has said the right things, but somehow the administration has lost its way on this issue. It's already eliminated the curbside organics pilot program, and it's done so despite having the commitment in its 2015 One NYC Sustainability Plan to expand it to serve all New Yorkers. City Hall apparently views organics collection as a frill operation like the after-school clarinet program rather than the essential sanitation service it is. This is short-sighted and ill-advised. It'll boost the city's contribution to emissions from landfills. It'll pull the rug out from under Grown New York City and the Lower East Side Ecology Center, Big Reuse, Earth Matters, and local botanic gardens across the city. They've been operating successful programs for composting on a shoestring budget for many years. And it'll leave tens of thousands of New Yorkers without a way to sustain dispose of their organics. Two last points. The mayor's proposal provides the perfect opportunity for the council to act. The most important step is to restore $7 million in funding to preserve community composting. This is a drop in the bucket compared to the $107 million that's been cut from the DSNY budget. And as the council explores ways of cutting back on the New York City Police Department budget, in part to enhance needed social programs, a move we support, we suggest that a tiny portion of those reallocated funds be set aside to support the $7 million request. Finally, we strongly support the two very sensible pieces of legislation before the committee. We detailed the reasons for doing that in our written testimony, and we believe that Commissioner Garcia cares about these issues, but we urge you to find funds in the existing budget to at least keep this program alive and to work seriously with the project sponsors to advance these bills. In regard to Councilmember Lander's question, ultimately the council should enact a new law requiring the mandatory separation of discarded organics and the curbside collection of these materials from every city household. That's the only way we'll make this program be able to stand on its 2 feet and actually make funds for the city taxpayers. Finally, we're grateful to the council staff, especially Nicole Labine, Asher Friedman, Abigail Bressler, and Laura Popa, for focusing on this important issue when the issues of the coronavirus and systemic racism have justifiably occupied so much public attention. We thank everyone on the council staff for making this an important issue and for seeking to address it today.
Thank you. As a reminder to council members, we'll be asking for questions after each 3 panelists. So next we'll hear from Carlos Castel-Crook, followed by Justin Wood, followed by Toke Michelle Oyewole.
Starting time.
Carlos?
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Castel-Crook, and I am a representative from the New York League of Conservation Voters. NYLCV represents over 30,000 members in New York City, and we are committed to advancing a sustainability agenda that will make our people, our neighborhoods, and our economy healthier and more resilient. I would like to thank Chair Reynoso, Chair Cabrera, and Councilmember Powers for the opportunity to testify today. In 2015, Mayor de Blasio made a pledge that excited environmentalists and citizens alike. This pledge was to reduce the waste we send to landfills by 90% by the year 2030. Yet here we are, 5 years later, having made little progress toward the zero waste goal. Now, due to COVID-19 and the recession, the mayor has suspended curbside collection of organic waste and is proposing to cut funding for community composting. While these cuts are upsetting to see, we understand that the financial strain on our city must be addressed. However, we would like to use these cuts as an opportunity to reevaluate, revamp, and expand our waste diversion program so that we come out of this crisis ready to achieve zero waste by the original 2030 deadline. Intros 1942 and 1943 would be a crucial step in the journey to our zero waste goals. By establishing 3 community drop-off sites per community district, New York City will be able to continue its composting and recycling efforts even as curbside collection is suspended. Bringing these recycling opportunities to every community district is a crucial step towards a more equitable waste diversion program. And we're pleased that these bills would provide opportunities to recycle materials such as textiles and electronic waste in addition to organic waste. It is also crucial that we maintain the recycling culture we have already established, as we saw when the metal, glass, and plastic recycling program was suspended during the post 9/11 recession. When recycling programs are cut, participation rates struggle to recover when the programs are reinstituted. Therefore, we are also asking the council restore $7 million in the fiscal 20-year budget for existing community compost collection sites. But this would not only provide an outlet for New Yorkers to continue to recycle their organic waste, but also maintain dedicated composting personnel at Grow NYC, Big Reuse, the Lower East Side Ecology Center, and other groups that have operated these essential community-based programs for years. Our goal of zero waste landfills by 2030 is an achievable one, but we must make decisions and establish programs that work towards it, not cut the programs necessary for us to make progress. We urge the council to pass Intro 1942, Intro 1943, and reinstate the $7 million for community composting in the budget to help New Yorkers continue to recycle their organic waste. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Justin Wood, followed by Toke Oyewole, followed by Diorcine Hilaire.
Starting time.
Justin?
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Justin Wood. I'm the Director of Organizing and Research at the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest and a member of the Save Our Compost Coalition. I want to thank Council Members Powers, Chair Reynoso, and Co-Chair Cabrera for moving so swiftly to introduce and have a hearing on these bills after learning that funding for both curbside and community drop-off collections of organic waste and textiles were suspended due to budget cuts imposed by the mayor. We also want to specifically thank Speaker Corey Johnson for scheduling this important hearing amidst an ongoing crisis of policing, public health, and mass unemployment in the city, and thank the members of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus for announcing a plan to reduce the NYPD budget by $1 billion, an urgent step needed to reform our massive police department and to mitigate the devastating cuts to other vital services in the mayor's proposed budget, including DSNY recycling, organics, and community education programs, as we've been hearing about today. NYLPE strongly supports the principles of the CORE Act and urge the council to pass it immediately after making any amendments necessary based on the testimony we've heard today. In particular, these bills' assurance that all communities will host at least 3 accessible and equitably sited recycling drop-off sites will help to ensure that communities historically excluded from recycling and compost programs can fully participate in and learn about the benefits of waste reduction convenient to home. However, like some of the other panelists, our most urgent request is that the council use the budget negotiating process to insist on restoring the very modest $7 million in funding needed for community drop-off sites and community education programs run by DSNY and its nonprofit partners to immediately resume operations. While the CORE Act will ensure that the city gives all New Yorkers the option to recycle and compost, it may take up to a year to implement, even if passed quickly. By acting immediately,
time expired.
Okay, thank you very much. So we also support strongly the restoration of $7 million in the budget so we can get this up and running quickly. And we also hope to work with the council on a citywide mandatory organics program that's really what we need, as several council members mentioned, to create good green jobs and move the needle on climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If council members have questions for the panel that just spoke, please use the hand raise Zoom function now. We'll begin with Chair Cabrera.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Great job today. And I want to thank the panelists. I want to follow up and appreciate your testimony, very insightful, with Manhattan Borough President Gil Brewer's comment. Do any of you happen to know regarding her question and the economy, really, if I understood the question right, the economy of scales when it comes to organic, at what point do we see more of a gain than a loss in comparison to other types of waste?
Yes, Council Member Cabrera, let me quickly see if I can answer that question. There are two costs to disposing of waste. One is the costs of getting rid of the waste or the trash at the end of the line. That's the tipping fee. There, it costs less to dispose of food waste and yard waste because they can be turned into valuable commodities, compost. And so if you're taking your food waste or yard waste to a composting facility or an anaerobic digestion facility, you will pay less per ton to dump that trash than you would if you have to send the waste to a distant landfill or incinerator, where the costs could be up to $130 a ton, and those costs have been going up for the city for years. So in order to make composting and organics collection save tens of millions of dollars for taxpayer residents, we just have to make sure that the costs of collecting that trash are equivalent to the costs of collecting ordinary waste today. And there should be no reason why it isn't, because it's still the same amount of trash. But you need to have full trucks of organics in the same way that you have now full trucks of regular trash. That can only be done, the experience in Seattle, San Francisco, and Portland show, by having a mandatory composting program. So you have the same amount of waste that you're collecting, but you're collecting it in an organics truck, in a recycling truck, and then in a truck that collects whatever is left over. And by rescheduling and revamping your collection system according to each neighborhood's needs, you are able to get those collection costs to be equivalent, whether it's the existing program or organics, and you're saving money in the disposal costs at the end of the line. So, as Councilmember Lander said, once we get the council to enact a mandatory composting program, mandatory composting organics collection program, and give the city time to work out the kinks, to get the system right, to figure out what went right and what went wrong with the voluntary pilot project, the city taxpayers can be saving tens of millions of dollars a year by sending all of our food waste and yard waste to composting operations. It also creates in-city jobs. It's more equitable from an environmental justice perspective. And of course, it will put a big dent in climate change, because landfills are the third largest source of methane emissions in the United States. So if the city is looking at these issues from a long-term perspective, that's where we need to be heading.
So Eric, help me here, and I don't want to be long, but you literally put all the green checks in every single item, which matters at the end of the day. So you're giving a great value for us to go this way. The only one that she said, and I heard the commissioner, you were there, I was watching you, was that if it made economic sense, then she will be on board with organics. Well, is there something that, because obviously because of the budget constraints right now, but is there something that is not translating here in terms of what you're saying? And I'm sure you have plenty of conversations.
Let me try one more time. The existing voluntary program has, as Councilmember Lander said, the participants of the willing. And
Right.
but what that means is the city has been sending around the sanitation department an extra truck to collect food waste and yard waste. Since it's been voluntary, some people have been participating, some not. As a result, those trucks go back empty or half
I get
empty
it.
or a third empty. That's inefficient and therefore it costs more. If you have a mandatory program, folks will be putting out their food waste in much larger quantities. You'll be able to reroute your trucks and reschedule your systems for collection, and you'll be having food waste trucks that are full, just like regular trash trucks. And in
Right.
that case, the labor costs will be equivalent because it's the same amount of waste, but you'll be saving money on every ton that you send to a composting facility rather than to an expensive out-of-state landfill.
So Eric, I get all that. My big question is, why not pull the trigger here? Since what you're saying makes more sense, especially if you have the economy of scales taking place there, right? So that's, I don't understand why the pushback from the administration, if at the end of the day, it's going to save us more money. And at the same time, we are answering the economic, constraints that we have right now, that at the end of the day, it's going to save us money,
Well, the last thing I'll say is the administration agrees with that philosophically. Commissioner Garcia has been a big supporter of mandatory organics collection, and the mayor in his 2015 sustainability report said we're going to do this and we're going to have collections for all New Yorkers by the end of 2018. So philosophically, they're there. As we know, right now, it's in the middle of two separate significant crises, and the budget people in City Hall are just looking at the next 6 months. And that may be the right thing for them to do. But for the City Council, we expect our representatives to take a longer term view of what's best for all of the people in this city over the years to come. And there's no doubt that restoration of this tiny $7 million to keep these programs that have been successfully operating on a shoestring alive, and then to plan in the fall for passage of a mandatory organics program that would phase in after you analyze what went right and what went wrong. You come up with a plan for how to do it, how to reschedule your collections, and how to do it efficiently, and working with the unions that would support this. And that ought to be done by the council in the fall. Hopefully the administration would support that because number one, in that first year, when we're facing our biggest budget crisis, there won't be any consequences. You're really asking the sanitation department to study what went right and what went wrong with their pilot project, and then to begin developing an implementation plan that would take place in the out years.
Thank you, Eric. You have 110% support, and we'll continue here in the council and another committee. You have a true champion, the chair, and Councilmember Powers, and all the committee members. We're standing with you 100%. And let's get this to the finish line. It just makes sense all around. I just wanted you to say and put it on the record.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Councilmember Cabrera. We appreciate your support.
Thank you. I want to recognize we'll be also joined by Council members Chaim Dodge and Constantinidi. And with that, I turn it back to Nicole for any other council members who may have questions.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Lander.
Starting time.
Thanks very much. And I joined a little late, so maybe this got asked of the commissioner, but I think with this panel, it's a good place to ask too. I just want to make sure we, for the record, draw out the environmental justice issues here and really understand the ways in which failing to stand up a more comprehensive organics program leads to additional truck traffic in low-income communities of color with all the attendant asthma and health risks that go along with that, and what we could imagine if we get to the other side of this. So I wonder whether one of the panelists could speak to that.
I think Eric touched on all these things, and thank you, Councilmember Lander and Co-Chair Cabrera, for your questions. I think one thing just to stress is that organics recycling in particular leads to a lot more jobs cumulatively. All the studies show this than exporting waste to landfills and incinerators. And it can lead to a lot more in-city and near-city jobs. And these can be good, high-quality green jobs, union jobs, living wage jobs. So it's a chance both to reduce the diesel truck emissions needed and train emissions and pollution, PM 2.5, and all these things that we now know are linked to COVID and so many other diseases, a chance to reduce those emissions, particularly in communities that have borne the brunt of living near transfer stations geared towards exporting waste. And then it's also a chance to create a lot of good in-city jobs and try to target those jobs and that infrastructure development to communities that are also being hit the hardest by mass unemployment. And I know other panelists will have a lot to say on this. Just one other note, I mean, at the beginning of this crisis, there was some new data coming out of cities like Seattle showing that on the economies of scale question, they had indeed, by getting such widespread compost and organics recycling, reduced their cost to the point that it was lower than or at most equivalent to landfills. So these costs really can be brought down while creating a lot more jobs and reducing both local emissions and carbon emissions.
That's great, thank you. I was going to ask about what cities had seen reductions, but I think between that and some of what Eric said in his answer to Chair Cabrera earlier, that was really helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no more council member questions, we'll move on to the next panel. We'll hear first from Toke Michelle Oyewole, and then followed by Dior St. Hilaire and Justin Green. Toke.
Starting time.
Hello, thank you to the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management for the opportunity to speak today, and speedy recovery to Chair Reynoso. My name is Dr. Toke Michelle Oyewole, and I'm testifying on behalf of the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. Founded in 1991, NEJA is a nonprofit citywide membership network linking grassroots organizations from low-income neighborhoods and communities of color in their fight for environmental justice. For decades, NEJA has led efforts for comprehensive policy reforms to address the disproportionate burden of New York's solid waste system on a handful of environmental justice communities. To handle nearly 35,000 tons of garbage generated each day in New York City, waste trucks needlessly drive thousands of miles per night through multiple boroughs of New York City, polluting our air with diesel fuel, clogging our streets, and diminishing our quality of life. The impacts are greatest in those few low-income and communities of color where truck-dependent transfer stations are clustered, causing higher proportions of health consequences such as asthma, heart disease, and cancer. Today, we're testifying to urge the city to not sidetrack its climate justice and zero waste goals by eliminating opportunities for recycling, organics, and other waste streams. In the short term, we urge the city to immediately restore food scrap drop-off sites by funding them at the relatively small amount of $7 million. Additionally, passing the CORE Act would increase access to food scrap and textile recycling for all New Yorkers, including in the outer boroughs and NYCHA residences. Local scale organics processing can divert waste from being trucked to transfer stations clustered in the environmental justice communities in New York City. Completely eliminating all forms of organics collection means that the majority of this waste will go to the intermediary local transfer stations, then to landfills and incinerators in EJ communities outside of the city. A better solution would be to process this organic waste locally, which in the long run could reduce costs from truck transport and tipping into facilities. This requires the city to make a commitment to increasing its local organics processing capacity in the very near term. Some of the drop-off sites
expired.
Okay, just a few quick points. Some of the drop-off sites selected should be coupled with processing capacity to ensure that we're streamlining processing organic waste at a local level. We want to ensure that the collection programs do not replicate harms in EJ communities by ensuring we're optimizing truck routes, using collection with zero and low emission vehicles when possible, cutting just 5% of the NYPD's $516 million overtime budget would provide around 4 times the amount of funding to restore this composting program. Our members have a long history of advocacy in terms of textile and e-waste recycling, and have shown that the educational component is critical in its efficacy. And yeah, there's more, but I will submit this in a written form. And in closing today, I've made the case for the importance of immediately restoring drop-off sites and increasing the equity and access of drop-off sites, and co-locating drop-off sites and organic processing in the short term. But we reiterate the urgency of introducing legislation for mandatory organics and increased organics processing capacity citywide. Together, these pieces of legislation would enable access to convenient recycling of various waste streams for all residents, diverting 1/3 of waste from landfills, incinerators, polluting clusters of transfer stations, and enabling New York to locally process organics, and providing a lot of jobs to Black and Brown residents in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Dior St. Hilaire, followed by Justin Green, followed by Christine Dates Romero. Dior.
Starting time.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Dior St. Hilaire, and I am the founder of Green Fiend, a Bronx-based environmental consulting firm using hip hop to teach sustainability through compost education and green technology. As a worker-owned cooperative through Green Fiend Organics, we adopt the principles of environmental justice, waste equity, and a circular economy. Our model is designed to collect and process organic waste locally. One NYC is a plan by the mayor's office for New York City to confront our climate crisis. However, the removal of the organics collection program through Mayor de Blasio's proposed budget is in direct conflict with these goals to be achieved by 2050. Our ability as a city to maintain these initiatives, even through adverse times, is what makes us a leader in the same district in which it was generated. As a Bronx resident, I believe that organic waste should be collected and processed in the same district in which it was generated, considering only a few poor neighborhoods that are environmental justice communities bear the burden of the city's refuse, with the South Bronx being one of them. Access to drop-off locations that accept food scrap and textile recycling in each community district can bring us closer to a more sustainable and equitable future, yet many other factors must be considered. Mandating a budget line item and having explicit language around resource allocation within DSNY's budget is imperative to ensure there are penalties for not prioritizing this effort in the future. Making sure that education and outreach has ample funding through community-based organizations to carry out the larger goal of diverting food waste from landfills. Ensuring that drop-off locations within each community district are not sited in the neighborhoods with the lowest median incomes. Out of the 3 drop-off locations, have at least one that actually processes the organic waste so it doesn't have to be trucked out. Making the hiring process for these drop-off sites transparent while mandating that MWBE businesses be allowed to participate in this effort. We must prioritize people of color who live in these neighborhoods to lead and control how the decisions that affect us are made as we increase local processing capacity. Saving the infrastructure that already exists is of supreme importance. While I see CORE Act as a step to mandatory curbside collection, which is really how we reach an equitable solution for New York City residents, we must fight to make sure we restore the $7 million of funding directed to community composting. There's an already established network, and we must honor the relationships built on the ground while figuring out how to grow this and allow access for others to get involved.
Time expired.
May not physically, almost done, to be make it to a drop-off location. And so whether it is because of disability or time constraints, we believe we must introduce and pass legislation mandating for citywide mandatory curbside organics collection. We envision a society where resources and benefits are equally shared and where people play a role in community decision-making in proportion to the degree that they are affected. So in closing, we support Intro 1942 and 1943 with the aforementioned amendments and see it as a stepping stone to a larger vision for an equitable waste system that does not put all the burden on just a few low-income communities or communities of color. I'll leave you with a rhyme for the time. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, equality. Climate solutions equal Black bodies. New institution equal alternative economy. Circular democratic and solidarity. The point is that the power lies with the people. Your contribution is equal. Don't pacify just to be cool. Let's support the truth, strategic in what we do. Pass the CORE Act with some changes that are few. So be committed to NYC and how we see the future of our city green, but it takes a little more than just equity reflected in our hearts, money, and policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Justin Green, followed by Christine Dates Romero, followed by David Hurd. Justin?
Starting time.
Hi, I'm Justin Green. I'm the Executive Director of Big Reuse. Big Reuse is a nonprofit organization that works for zero waste in New York City through community composting outreach in our reuse center. We've created innovative social waste enterprises over the years, living wage, green jobs, and job training opportunities. And I wanted to thank Chairman Reynoso, Chair Cabrera, Councilmember Powers, Councilmember Lander, and everyone else who supported these efforts to reinstate composting, all the community groups out there. There's been such an outpouring of support for composting. It's been really overwhelming to see that. We support the Big Reuse, the CORE Act, to reopen and expand equitably distribute food scrap drop-off sites for composting throughout New York City. Unstaffed food scrap drop-off sites are a cost-effective way to provide access to composting for all New Yorkers. Composting is really an essential service that should continue to be funded. The climate crisis in 2020 is on track to be the hottest year on record for the planet. The impacts of climate change will hit low-income communities around the world the hardest. Those communities will suffer devastating consequences from our inaction as one of the wealthiest and most influential cities in the world. Funding saved by cutting curbside composting and community composting accounted for approximately 26 million, the equivalent of just 12 days of NYPD overtime last year. We could reinstate all composting for 12 days of NYPD overtime. Organic waste in landfills generates methane. Methane is 86 times more powerful than carbon dioxide at warming the Earth over 2 decades. And it greatly increases warming because of that power of absorbing radiation. Mandatory curbside and collection, curbside collection and community composting are essential. It should be reinstated immediately as part of our responsibility to fight climate change. If mandatory curbside can't be immediately reestablished, the CORE Act will help New York City get back on track. In order to achieve the goals of the CORE Act, the $7 million of the current budget cuts to community composting and community food scrap drop-offs.
Time expired.
175 drop-off sites could be reestablished while operating community composting sites such as Big Reuse. So we applaud your efforts and really think we need to keep going with reinstating the current funding and the CORE Act as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Do any council members have questions for the previous panel? If so, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next panel. We'll hear from Christine Dates-Romero, followed by David Hurd, followed by Cece Pineda. Christine?
Starting time.
Christine?
Yes, sorry. I thought the host will mute me. Okay, we'll start all over again. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Christina Dates-Romero. I'm the Executive Director of the Lower East Side Ecology Center, who started its programs in 1987 by offering community-based recycling opportunities for paper, bottles, cans, by creating drop-off programs. Today, we provide e-waste and composting services, environmental stewardship opportunities, and educational programming. We are testifying in support of the CORE Act to implement community-based recycling drop-off opportunities that create equitable access to environmental programs and green jobs while reducing the burden of truck traffic to waste transfer stations located in communities of color. The city needs to immediately restore the $7 million cut that were made to Pro-NYC and New York City Campus Project partners, which the Ecology Center is part of. These existing programs offer 170 food scrap drop-off sites across the 5 boroughs and compost education to hundreds of community groups to build up their own composting programs. The implementation of the CORE Act allows for an opportunity to build on what was created over the last 30 years. For that, the existing program needs to stay in place. The Ecology Center has run a community-based composting program since 1990 and has been the Manhattan partner of the New York City Compost Project since 2005. Each week, we serve approximately 3,500 households through 10 drop-off locations within a 3-mile radius of the East River Park compost yard. We have created a hyperlocal closed-loop system distributing the finished compost to local community gardens and parks. The program contributes directly to the health of our community, creates green jobs and job training opportunities, and offers community engagement and education. The CORE Act is a vehicle to create more community drop-offs in the 5 boroughs, and we urge that together with creating drop-off opportunities, efforts should be made to create local processing capacity for organic waste. In closing, we would like to urge the City Council to restore the $7 million in FY21 for community-based composting and education programs, implement the CORE Act by including more local composting processing sites, and pass legislation for a mandatory organics collection program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from David Hurd, followed by Cici Pineda, followed by Kathy Nazari. David?
Starting time.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reynoso, Co-Chair Cabrera, and Councilmember Powers, and members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of the CORE Act today. My name is David Hurd, and I am the Director of Zero Waste Programs at Grow NYC. Grow NYC has played a pivotal role in helping improve the environmental quality of life in New York City for 50 years. Personally, I have been working in recycling and composting in New York City since 1980. The proposed executive budget eliminates organics recycling in New York City, as well as additional DSNY services designed to reduce sending waste to landfills. These eliminations undercut the progress the city has made in diverting food scraps and yard waste from landfills, a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. The elimination of all funding for recycling outreach and education and composting of organic waste is short-sighted and will have long-term negative implications, setting the city back further from its goals of zero waste to landfills, greenhouse gas reduction, and environmental justice. We have seen what happens when recycling programs are terminated. You don't go back to square one, you move behind it. The residential recycling program in New York City has yet to achieve the levels of landfill diversions it had prior to 2001, before the portions of the program were suspended by Mayor Bloomberg after 9/11. We support the ambitious and equitable goals of the CORE Act. However, in order to create the community recycling centers proposed in the Act, we believe that the top priority and urgent need is for the City Council to restore the $6.3 million in funding to Grow NYC and the New York City Compost Project that is proposed to be cut in the fiscal 21 budget. This restoration could bring back 175 food scrap drop-off sites that we collectively managed when activities were suspended on March 22nd. This would bring the City Council very close to the CORE Act goal of 177 sites. Without restoring funding, these bills will be unable to achieve their objectives. The 8 organizations affected by these cuts represent the backbone of community-based recycling and composting in New York City. The funding for Grow NYC Zero Waste Schools program has also been eliminated and represents an additional $972,000 not reflected in the proposed budget cut of $2.8 million for recycling education. We request that this funding be restored as well. This restoration will be critical as New York City public schools are anticipated to reopen in September. Organic tonnage is improved by 103% on zero waste school routes compared to 22% on non-zero waste.
Time expired.
Routes. The CORE Act is sensible legislation that we support, but that we see as a second step after restoring funding to Grow NYC and the New York City Compost Project to continue to move our city closer towards zero waste in an equitable manner. We cannot squander the progress in waste diversion we have made over the past 3 decades and must restore the budget cuts to community-based composting and recycling education and pass the CORE Act to bridge us to the future of citywide mandatory curbside collection. I would like to thank Chairman Reynoso and the committee for the opportunity to speak with you today and for proposing this important legislation, and look forward to working with you in its implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Cici Pineda, followed by Kathy Nazari, followed by Matthew M. Savello.
Starting time.
Cici?
Good afternoon. My name is Ceci Pineda, and I'm the Executive Director of BK Rot. We are New York City's first bike-powered food waste hauling and composting service. Our project is staffed by young people of color in Bushwick. A special thanks to our Councilmember Reynoso, CM Powers, and others for advancing this critical issue. At BK Rot, we understand how interlinked our environmental and climate crises are to the systemic violence against Black, Indigenous, and Brown communities. We started as a grassroots response to a lack of composting options, excess waste infrastructure, and high unemployment rates for Black and Brown youth in Bushwick. We strive to create a just and regenerative model that invests in our soils and our community. Mayor de Blasio's proposed cuts eliminate several services essential to community health. Today, I call attention to the concerning cuts to organics recycling. Over a third of the city's waste is compostable, yet sending this material to landfills amplifies toxic air Black and Brown communities breathe and contributes to lasting climate impacts, which disproportionately impacts these same communities around the world. We ask the council to take the following actions to advance community composting options and equity. Immediately restore at least $7 million of funding towards community composting to support operating over 170 drop-off sites, community education, and local processing sites. We urge an additional expansion of funds for community outreach, education, and composting options to serve communities of color previously excluded from DSNY's composting services. The council can easily fund this by following calls from Black organizers to reallocate at minimum $1 billion from the NYPD budget and instead invest them in the well-being and health of Black communities. BK-ROT supports the CORE Act, and we propose the following recommendations. We urge the city to invest in local facilities to process organic waste. This reduces economic, environmental, and health costs transporting materials longer distances and also makes finished compost readily available for community use. Closed loop models offer communities local employment opportunities as well as the
Time
direct
expired.
composting. Just a few more points on this. This is a critical educational component that transforms our relationship to waste while also increasing local food and climate resilience. Also, our collection vehicles must be zero or low emissions vehicles, which also creates local employment opportunities and reduces local air pollution and carbon emissions. Our collection sites should be equally distributed with consistent hours and ideally staffed by local community members who are best fit to communicate and educate their neighbors. We must prioritize serving communities like NYCHA residents historically left out of easily available composting options. We recommend hiring local community members to leading community engagement and education campaigns for successful participation. Lastly, the city should ensure community composting organizations and social enterprises are supported in continuing to build the systems and infrastructure to guarantee that all New Yorkers have access to organics recycling and composting. There is a wealth of knowledge and resources held among those of us who have been collecting organic waste and maximizing our efficiency and capacity to process organic waste into compost on small plots of land. We recommend the committee engage these stakeholders in development of the CORE Act. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do any council members have questions for the previous panel? If so, use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no council member questions, we'll move on to the next panel. First, we'll hear from Kathy Nazari. Next, we'll hear from Matthew M. Savello, and then we'll hear from Meredith Danberg-Ficarelli. Kathy?
Time begins now.
Thank you, Nicole. Good afternoon, Chair Reynoso, Councilman Powers, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Kathy Nazari, County Committee woman and concerned citizen. I urge you to pass intros 1942 and 1943. We all know we're in a climate crisis and that Blacks and Hispanics are at increased risk of the devastating health impacts and premature deaths due to toxic colonialism. While COVID-19 has put the city on pause, neither the climate crisis nor resultant deaths will wait for us to return to normal. So I commend you for getting us back on track with composting. The pandemic taught us the need to find equitable, cost-efficient, multidimensional solutions that require working together as a community. How can we do it expeditiously? Step 1, restore the roughly 175 Grow NYC drop-offs. 2, have drop-off and processing at the same location. This would eliminate transport and process fees as well as carbon emissions. Nearly 2/3 of the city's 536 community gardens have the infrastructure to collect and compost on site. While not all have the same capacity, they can scale up with minimal funding from DSNY for equipment and staff. For this to work, the gardens must have legislative protection from real estate developers. 3, include the nearly half of the DOE's 1,800 schools citywide, plus universities that compost, and enlist local nonprofits, block associations, bids, and community boards that want to help. 4, composting must be equitable. Let's scale up NYCHA's urban farm and garden composting for NYCHA residents. Residents should be hired to run it, funded by DSNY after completing free training from Green City Force. Doing it on site creates a closed loop system. It also addresses their leaf issue and
Time
rat
is
problem.
expired.
Almost done. There is interest if done equitably. 5, set up drop-offs in grocery store parking lots in the outer boroughs. 6, create a rebate program for private carters who already have the infrastructure to pick up some multifamily buildings. I've shared some of these ideas with the speaker and council staff, and I'm happy to work with you on it. In order for this to work, there must be ample funding for education, including for buildings and folks like myself who want to do it at home. I would also ask that the sites be operational by October 31st. Lastly, let's bring back the safe drop-off sites for and hazardous waste. I thank you for your time. Please pass intros 1942 and 1943. Chair Reynoso, I hope you feel better soon, and thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Matthew M. Civello, followed by Meredith Danberg Ficarelli, followed by Emily Bachman. Matthew?
Time begins now.
My name is Matthew Civello, and I am chair of the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board and the MSWAB. I am testifying on its behalf regarding intros 1942 and 43, otherwise known as the CORE Act. Mayor de Blasio's proposed fiscal year 2021 budget that eliminates residential organics collection and processing program in the city of New York has left 3.5 million New York City residents, many of whom live in Manhattan, with no alternative but to place their organic waste into the landfill or incinerator-bound garbage. The emails received by the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board over the past several weeks indicates that this has been a difficult adjustment for many New York City residents who participated in these important programs. As these programs sit dormant, they become more difficult to restart, and we stand to lose much of the hard-earned dedication and behavior change in residents who participated in them. If they are not restored, the city is throwing away a foundation that could eventually support a successful mandatory curbside organics diversion program. Implementing an effective organics collection and processing program is the single most important step New York City can take to achieve its stated goal of sending zero waste to landfill and incineration. Given the severity of the budget cut crisis that New York City faces, there is a sensible path forward to ensure that we can preserve and protect the progress we have made in collecting and diverting organics. First, the budget cuts to the community composting program should be restored. This would require a small $7 million to restore Grow NYC program and New York City Compost Project partners, and a significant portion of the 170 drop-off and community education sites in operation before the cuts. For Manhattan, this funding restoration would reactivate the vital composting and processing education and outreach of 2 major composting facilities, the Lower East Side Ecology Center and on Governor's Island Earth Matter. Both of these crucial members of the New York City Compost Project have provided education and outreach to tens of thousands of New York City residents over the years. Second, following the restoration of this funding, the next important step is to pass intros 1942 and 43, the CORE Act, the subject of this hearing. Implementing the CORE Act would move the city closer to a goal of zero waste to landfill and incineration in a more equitable manner. Intro 1942 would extend food and yard waste drop-off locations to areas previously not served by the program by establishing 3 drop-off locations per community district. The Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board supports this equitable extension. We request that Intro 1942 be amended to specify that all material collected at the drop-off sites be sent to the refunded compost projects and amended to ensure that the continuation of important education, outreach, and technical community support for gardens and composting efforts. Intro 1943 provides for the equitable distribution of 3 textile recycling centers in each community district. The Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board supports this expansion. Third, we look forward to seeing the council introduce legislation committing the city to a mandatory residential curbside organics collection program that would represent a significant step towards a zero waste New York City. We thank Chair Reynoso and their members of the committee for consideration of our testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Meredith Danberg-Ficarelli, followed by Emily Bachman, followed by Claire Fontaine. Meredith?
Time begins now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Meredith Danberg-Ficarelli. I'm the director of Common Ground Compost LLC. We are a zero waste services company helping businesses and residents divert food scraps and recyclables from landfills. And we run Reclaimed Organics, a bicycle-powered microhauling operation that serves businesses and residents in Manhattan. Since the mayor defunded residential organics programs, we've played an educational and coordination role among new and emerging microhaulers and processors. Enterprising individuals from across the boroughs have reached out to us for advice and guidance to build and launch organics diversion programs and services in their communities in response to the sudden void of food scrap drop-offs and curbside collection. Organics are special. Unlike plastic, glass, metal, and paper that are most effectively processed in massive volumes to achieve economies of scale, organics can remain even within an individual's apartment and be effectively recycled. Food scraps can be walked to community gardens or collected by foot and bike, consolidated for processing in community scale compost facilities. Organics can be organized at micro scale transfer stations to be collected and processed at commercial scale near the city. Rather than just talking about it, we should build a system that keeps 100% of the city's organic waste within 150 miles of the city. This goal would require investment in education, job training, and infrastructure. This approach would also create many more employment opportunities that are currently involved in our city's waste management supply chain, one that disproportionately burdens low-income communities and depends on so-called waste-to-energy facilities and far-flung landfills. We must take every opportunity to make the best of the economic disaster we're currently living through. We urge the city to, at an absolute minimum, restore $7 million to allow Grow NYC and the formerly known as NYC Compost Project sites to immediately reopen. With equal urgency, we ask the city to expand the drop-off locations to include communities that were not previously served. Climate change will affect all of us, and the services we provide to mitigate the impacts of climate change must also be available to all.
Time has expired.
Sites should not be limited to residential organics, just one more point, but should have the opportunity to generate revenue to support the employment opportunities therein. A suggested fee structure, standard operating procedures, safety guidelines, training toolkits, troubleshooting, and of course, data collection tools can all be developed and provided by the city. Individuals can be empowered to educate their neighbors about why composting and organics diversion matter, and a variety of other reuse, repair, and other diversion programs can also be centered at these sites. Thank you for your time. Councilmember Reynoso, I hope you feel better. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Do any council members have questions for the previous panel? If so, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next panel. First, we'll hear from Emily Bachman, followed by Claire Fontaine, followed by Oliver Wright. Emily?
Time begins now.
Thank you, Chair Reynoso and members of this committee for allowing me to voice support for Intro 1942 of the CORE Act today. My name is Emily Bachman, and I'm here as a representative of the New York City Community Composting Coalition on behalf of over 7,000 New Yorkers who have signed our petition to save community composting. We appreciate that the CORE Act seeks to reopen, expand, and equitably distribute food scrap drop-off sites throughout the city during the extended suspension of the Curbside Organics program, and we agree with the CORE Act's underlying principles, that composting is an essential service that must continue to be funded in the New York City budget, and that food scrap drop-off sites are the most cost-effective way to maintain access to this service for all New Yorkers. As others have noted, I cannot stress enough that successful implementation of the CORE Act requires that we first reverse $7 million of proposed budget cuts that eliminate all funding for Grow NYC Zero Waste programs and New York City Compost Project, altogether 8 nonprofit organizations that could restart services immediately and begin to expand once the CORE Act is passed. In the last few months, our city has made short-sighted budget decisions that effectively abandon our commitments to zero waste, climate resilience, and environmental justice. By eliminating all public funding for residential composting, the proposed budget creates a landscape where composting is only available to privileged New Yorkers with the ability to pay private companies to do the work our city should do. If you haven't seen a food scrap drop-off site before, the photo behind me is of the largest one in the country. Grand Army Plaza, Brooklyn, where 900 New Yorkers were bringing over 3,000 pounds of food scraps each week, all of which were composted by New York City Compost Project, hosted by Earth Matter on Governor's Island. I'm highlighting just one of 170 citywide food scrap drop-off sites
Time is expired.
and just one of 6 local processing sites that have been cut from the sanitation budget since March and that will remain closed for at least the next year if the current proposed budget does not change, but that could reopen immediately following reversal of these budget cuts. So I'll skip the rest and just thank you guys for listening to us and thinking creatively about cost-effective community-based solutions to composting and recognizing that we have to find a creative way to continue doing this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Claire Fontaine, followed by Oliver Wright, followed by Wiley Goodman. Claire?
Time begins now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, all right, good. My name is Claire Fontaine. I live in the East Village area in Village East Towers. We had recently implemented the brown bins program. It took about a year to persuade everybody to get involved in it, and now it's been pulled out from under the rug from us, which is difficult because a lot of people have gotten used to the idea of being able to recycle their organics, and they do not have any place to do it. Implementing the CORE Act would go a long way in helping people continue with this process. I mean, the thing is you just can't cut people off, put them on the shelf for 14 months and then, expect them to be able to, come back at full stream. They're just not going to be able to do that. And you also have all the personnel who have been working with the communities on these projects, and they're really important, and their skills and their experience is important. And if you put that on the side, you're going to lose a great deal of that. And it's like a waste. It's not just a waste of money, it's a waste of human potential. It's human capital. And that is, it's just, in every which way, it is very unwise to do that. And the CORE Act will provide, if you give the $7 million, you will be able to help people continue to recycle their waste, to learn new things, to keep these community activities going. And otherwise carting all this stuff off to a landfill, more money. So anyway, it's a penny wise, pound foolish. Thank you. And thank you to the committee for this hearing.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Oliver Wright, followed by Wiley Goodman, followed by Elsa Higbee. Oliver?
Time begins now.
Good afternoon, Chair Reynoso and members of the committee. My name's Oliver Wright. I'm representing Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board. We're a volunteer citizens organisation whose members are appointed by the Borough President to advise on waste matters, and we're also a member of the Save Our Compost Coalition. Thanks for taking the time to hear our testimony and for the good work that you're all doing more broadly. So first of all, we believe that the immediate focus should be on refunding and reopening the organics drop-off sites and NYC compost project programmes that were closed due to the Mayor's budget cuts in March. As has been stated, the $7 million is a drop in the ocean of overall budget cuts in terms of savings, and it leaves no city-funded residential organics programmes. It also threatens to reverse years of hard work on this matter. Secondly, we support the CORE Act and its passing as an important next step in improving waste equity and reducing environmental injustice. With regards to Intro 1942, we would echo Manhattan Borough President Brewer's statements about proximity to NYCHA developments and see that as an important part of environmental equity. We'd also like to see as many of the drop-off sites as possible have processing either on-site or nearby, and for the finished compost to be made available to the community as a resource. This not only brings social benefits, but also would reduce truck journeys, particularly to transfer stations, which are a key part of environmental justice, as has been highlighted. We'd like to see a rollout plan for the new sites in terms of staffing, resourcing and locations, and also ideally a phased opening rather than lots of sites coming online in a year's time. Turning to Intro 1943, we understand the focus will be on textiles, and while further access to textiles is good, provided it's complementary to existing streams, we don't want electronics and hazardous waste to be forgotten about, because these are key streams that are currently very much underserved. Residents are risking fines by illegal dumping given the lack of means of disposing of these items, and that itself is a social injustice.
Expired.
Thank you, almost done. So yeah, in summary, we'd like to see the refunding of the compost sites that were closed and the passing of the CORE Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If any council members have questions for the previous panel, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Chair Cabrera. One second.
Thank you so much, Nicole. At this moment, I want to pass the baton to our new co-chair, Councilmember Justin Brannan, who's going to be joining us. Today, we're doing teamwork to help our chair, Reynoso, making this hearing happen. So thank you to all of the advocates who are here today. We will continue. And with that, I'll pass it on to my good friend, Councilmember Justin Brannan, who's also a member of this committee.
Thank you, Chair Cabrera. Thank you. Okay, committee council, do we have questions from members? I can't see.
No council members have their hands raised.
Okay, we have another panel?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the next panel then.
Great. Next, we'll hear from Wiley Goodman, followed by Elsa Higbee, followed by Anna DeLuco. Wiley?
Time begins now.
Thank you, Chairman Reynoso and Councilmember Powers, for your leadership and for the Sanitation and Solid Waste Management Committee for your consideration of this testimony. My name is Wiley Goodman. I'm the chair of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board Organizing Committee, a sister organization to the Manhattan and Brooklyn SWABs. I'm here today on behalf of our diverse multi-sector organization to advocate restored funding to the New York City Compost Project, Grow NYC's organic and textile drop-off sites, and DSNY e-waste collection events, as well as passing the CORE Act to ensure waste recovery equity. While we understand proposed cuts were made in response to the $9 billion budget gap predicated by COVID-19, we believe these austerity measures will exacerbate health and quality of life disparities linked to race and income that our group is committed to address, and is thus the wrong response at this urgent moment. However, taking the argument at its face, we challenge the fiscal rationale for these cuts by showing that purported savings will be offset by economic, environmental, and social costs, and conclude by contending that even if programs are spared, the CORE Act is still needed to reach all New Yorkers. The programs at risk cost $7 million per year. Once cut, however, this money will not simply be recouped. That's because nearly 100 New Yorkers employed by these programs will lose their jobs, leading to unemployment benefits for furloughed workers, reduced tax revenue, and economic multiplier losses to the businesses from which these workers and organizations purchase. There will also be added waste export costs. In 2019, the city spent $41 million taking residential, school, and governmental trash to landfills. That same year, these threatened programs collected 17,000 tons of textiles, 2,300 tons of organics, and 1,056 tons of hazardous materials. Transporting these to landfills will cost approximately $3.34 million, reducing by nearly half the $7 million savings. We also need to look at sunk capital costs. These include construction of the Staten Island compost facility to increase local and regional processing of food and yard waste, and the Gowanus Community Composting Facility, able to accept 3 tons of material per week. This infrastructure, left dormant, will cost more to activate after a year delay. Social and environmental benefits will also fall to the wayside with programmatic cuts.
Time has expired.
Quickly, among them, annual failure to distribute 500 tons of compost to 12,000 residents, loss of finished compost to 500 street trees, lack of engagement of 7,200 volunteers providing over 30,000 hours of community service, and losses not considered in the city's number crunching exercise. Rather than resort to short-term panic selling of community composting, textile collections, and e-waste in light of COVID-19, we need to reinvest in the One NYC goal to become the most resilient, equitable, and sustainable city in the world and send at least 90% less waste to landfills by the year 2030. That means making organic collections mandatory, as Council Speaker Johnson recommended before the pandemic. In truth, we would soon have no choice but to adopt innovative strategies around waste disposal. China no longer wants our recyclables. US cities no longer want our pre-trussables. If we don't solve reduce, reuse, and recycle soon, we're looking at far higher costs down the road, which the city says it can ill afford. Again, thank you for the council and the committee for hearing our testimony. We wish Anthony, Councilmember Reynoso well. We want to thank the Queens Council members who have signed on to the CORE Act, Constantinides, Grodenchik, Valone, Van Bramer, and as we learned just before this session, Donovan Richards. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Elsa Higbee, followed by Ana DeLuco, followed by Pierre Simmons. Elsa?
Time begins now.
Just a point of protocol before my time starts. Most of us testifying today were not made aware of the 2-minute time limit. So everyone is prepared 3 minutes. If my time could start again, I will start now. Thank you, Chair Reynoso, members of the Sanitation and Solid Waste Committee, and members of the Council for hearing us today. The objective of Legislation 1942 of the CORE Act is the provision of equitable access to food scrap drop-offs. The objective of the mayor is to drastically cut the city's budget. The two competing objectives are a recipe for meaningless implementation of legislation that has strong values, but will not provide the equity that is inherent in mandatory curbside composting. If equity is the goal, let's not spend money on a new program that does not have infrastructure and no staff to plan its implementation. Let's put the funds back into New York City Compost Project and Grow NYC so that we can maintain the infrastructure, skills, and community networks already in place to build up CORE if mandatory curbside is not possible. I am Elsa Higbee, the project manager of the New York City Compost Project hosted by Queens Botanical Garden. The New York City Compost Project is the foundation of the city's organics movement, and it is a nationally recognized program. Our staff consists of 3 award recipients from the United States Composting Council. Our Master Composter Certificate course has been copied many times across the United States. And most council members have not heard of us because we are not a legal entity and do not seek direct relationships with council members. Yet, the Compost Project is arguably the most successful melding of grassroots initiatives and publicly funded programming that the city has ever seen. All of the existing community-hosted food scrap drop-offs were recruited from the networks of the 7 New York City Compost Project host sites. While the 175 sites may not have been distributed 3 per council district, they represented an infrastructure that was built from the bottom up, residents and community groups stepping forward to participate in making New York City a better, greener place.
Time is expired.
And the New York City Compost Project is their only support. Over 70% of the staff at Compost Project have come out of volunteer opportunities created by the Compost Project, and 50% of them are master composters. My colleagues have come up through green job training programs, AmeriCorps, volunteerism, and many of them have moved on to work for DSNY, micro haulers, the Department of Environmental Protection, Parks, Randall's Island, Rutgers, and the list goes on. If you haven't noticed, I'm painting the picture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have hired from New York City residents and from the diverse pool of people who have come forward and said, I want to be part of this. I want to make my city a better place. Passing CORE without reinstating the budgets for New York City Compost Project and Grow NYC food scrap drop-offs is trading on deep, venerable community engagement for check-the-box equity that does little to broaden community awareness and empowerment. Real equity for food scrap collection is making curbside mandatory. The foundation for an equitable program that can succeed in the interim is maintaining New York City Compost Project's local outreach, education, and technical support, allowing its staff to plan for expansion into the aspirations of CORE when the budget allows for it. Thank you.
Thank you. If any council members have questions for the previous panel, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next panel. First, we'll hear from Anna DeLuco, followed by Pierre Simmons, followed by Beverly Crosby. Anna?
Time begins now.
Ya. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Josefa Marín. Soy recicladora y también soy miembro de la Junta Directiva de Weekend. Pido que Ana de Lucas me traduzca mi testimonio, por favor.
Good afternoon. My name is Josefa Marin, and I am a recycler and a member of the Sure Weekend Board of Directors. I ask Ana De Luco me to translate my testimony. I support the CORE Act because I live and work in North Brooklyn, in the council district represented by Antonio Reynoso, an area that suffers from environmental, economic, and social injustice. The CORE Act will ensure that we have a place to deposit our organics, electronics, and any other material that needs to be recycled. It will help ensure that the responsibility we all have to manage our waste and recycling is distributed throughout the city. The CORE Act will improve the health of waste pickers. Organic products attract pests, and electronic waste contains chemicals that are harmful to human health. I support the CORE Act in continuing to keep our neighborhoods clean. The community centers that would be created under this law would give work to more people and educate the community. I know this because it has happened already at Sure Weekend, the only nonprofit recycling center in New York that has existed for 12 years. Last year, more than 700 earned income through their work, and more than 200 students from kindergarten to college level visited Sure Weekend.
Time has expired.
Sure Weekend is supporting the creation of a circular economy to achieve a fairer tomorrow, leaving new generations with a cleaner and more sustainable planet. In addition, Sure Weekend is training us, recyclers, to develop our own initiative to open new centers. My husband and I are prepared and eager to take responsibility for managing a Sure Weekend extension, which could be one of the new centers that CORE proposes. Again, all our support for the CORE Act, because it is a step forward in doing the work we already do, cleaning our neighborhoods, promoting health, creating green jobs, educating and empowering our community to solve urgent problems like the waste management, as well as the environmental, economic, and social injustice we live in today. Thank you very much.
They're going to ask for Pierre.
Thank you.
Go up to.
Next, we'll hear from Pierre Simmons, followed by Beverly Crosby, followed by Helena Whitaker. Pierre?
Starting time.
Go ahead. Okay. We switched places, Pierre and I. So my name is Beverly Crosby, and yes, we at Sure Weekend fully support the CORE Act. Thanks to Chairman Powers and Reynoso for your proposal. We believe that the implementation of this legislation is doable. We at Sure Weekend are doing it. In 2015, a group of graduate students at Parsons New School researched strategies for the implementation of the Zero Waste 2030 plan and came to a clear and simple proposal to have 60 Sure We Cans, which they described as civic waste centers, basically what today has been proposed. After more than 10 years of doing a worthy job for the city, of providing income for hundreds of people who struggle to survive in an informal economy, and also some green jobs empowering the community without taxpayer money. We have requested funds from you, the City Council, to help us secure the site in order to continue our work that will help you implement this proposed legislation for the site for which we are now being threatened with eviction. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Pierre Simmons, followed by Helena Whitaker, followed by Marissa DeDominicis. Pierre?
Starting time.
The answer we hear that you cannot help us because we did not have the required contracts of minimum of $50,000 for the last 3 years. Yes, you are right. We do not have city contracts. The city has not offered and will not offer contracts for the main work we do because the city made a contract to handle recycling with a multi-million-dollar mining Australian corporation for 20 years. So we know we cannot get any city contract for the job for at least the next 10 years, if ever. But in 2015, with funds from the Speakers Initiative Communities of Color Nonprofit Stabilization Fund, thanks, Mr. Speaker, we developed a community compost program in response to a great need of the city in order to create more green jobs, more resources for our community. Then we applied to the city for $50,000 to keep running the program. And because it was not self-sustaining, we got $5,000. Thanks. From then on, we kept asking sanitation if we could apply for any program. They offer for compost. The answer, nothing is offered. The city signed a contract for more than $1.5 billion with Sims, a foreign corporation, and yet cannot give us $1,300,000 to its constituents who are trying to find ways of living with dignity and self-reliance in the midst of a terribly unjust economic system. And all because of requirements you made impossible to obtain. We were unable to meet under such conditions. The term a knee
expired.
A knee brace to the neck takes on a different connotation with the same result. What we have seen these past days, what so many voices are shouting on the streets, is exactly what we feel today before you. We're not begging. We're just asking for what is just, but refusing to give us what belongs to us, city allocated funds, which we badly need just once to continue doing self-sustaining and much needed environmental work to continue living. And I want to thank you.
Thank you. Do any council members have questions for this previous panel? If so, please use the Zoom hand raise function now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next panel. First, we'll hear from Helena Whitaker, followed by Marissa DeDominicis, followed by Jeff Twine. Helena?
Starting time.
Hello, my name is Helena Whitaker. I am a resident of Gowanus, and I'm submitting this testimonial to ask you to please allocate the budget fairly and help save composting and other social programs in New York City. As a citizen pruner, a garden committee member for our block association, and one of the tree stewards of our block, I can attest that we benefit tremendously from the full cycle of city compost, from collection to use of the final product. On our 12th Street block, we have 24 tree beds with healthy, mature trees. The beds are beautifully planted and maintained by the residents of our block, working as a group on weekends. Every spring, we pick up the best compost and mulch from our sponsors, the Gowanus Canal Conservancy. Last year, we entered the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens Greenest Block in Brooklyn competition for the first time and were semi-finalists on our first year of planting and beautifying our block. None of this would have been possible without the city compost and mulch processed here in our neighborhood by the GCC. Our neighborhood as a whole has been practicing curbside composting for years and has incorporated the practice as an integral part of the Sunday routine, almost as brushing your teeth. It felt right to be actively participating on the curbside collection program and having so little garbage. I used to brag about it to friends who did not have the program available in their neighborhoods. We spent years being conditioned to compost and recycle, and it is unthinkable to go back to placing all organic matter in the garbage. We are counting on your support to restore the 7 million funds, implement the CORE Act, and continue funding for community composting programs and curbside composting now, which will not only benefit directly our streets, tree beds, and community gardens, will create new green jobs, and in the bigger picture, will support broad efforts for environmental justice and climate change. It is not an option, it is crucial. Make curbside food scraps mandatory.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Marissa DeDominicus, followed by Jeff Twine, followed by Adam Berukowitz. Marissa?
Starting time.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, Council, for this opportunity to speak. I'm Marissa DeDominicus. I'm co-founder and ED really equitable or act legislation that provides Council member Chan for your suggestion of Island expanded as a destination for New York City food scraps.
I'm sorry, Marissa, we're having some technical issues hearing you. Hold on one moment. Do you want to try speaking again?
Sure. Is this better?
Yes, that sounds better. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Good afternoon, and thank you, Council, for this opportunity to speak. I'm Marissa DeDominicus. I'm the ED and co-founder of Earth Matter. We're located on Governor's legislation that
I'm
would
sorry,
provide.
Marissa, the audio is jumbled again. I think someone from IT will reach out to you and we'll circle back to you after the next panelist, if that's all right.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Jeff Twine.
Starting time.
For over 40 years, I've been president of Upper West Side Recycling. I was also secretary of a committee that coordinated the activities of all voluntary recycling centers in New York. Are you hearing me? I participated in meetings with DSNY when they were planning their recycling programs. I served as co-chair of the Manhattan SWAB Residential Committee during the 1990s. So I'm very familiar with how recycling has changed over the years. I want to emphasize that all the materials collected by DSNY were first recycled by community groups and nonprofits. These groups built up a base of participants, educated the public, and sparked interest that would later enable DSNY to take over the collection of recyclables on a larger scale. This is also the case now with food scrap composting. Eliminating private sector options would only make it more difficult for DSNY when they restart the program next June. Therefore, it's really important to retain funding now for Grow NYC, Lower East Side Equality, Big Reuse, and other members of the Compost Project. Organics recycling is in its infancy, as recycling of metal and glass was in the 1970s. People who have been recycling their food scraps through DSNY are committed and enthusiastic. They'd feel betrayed if they had no alternatives, if they were forced to throw food scraps in the garbage for an entire year. If they felt betrayed, they'd be less likely to participate in future food scrap collection, less likely to interest neighbors to do the same. Thus, we'd lose much of the momentum that's been built up in the food scrap collection movement. Also, continuing to fund the compost project now will enable its members to maintain the infrastructure that's been built up, the trucks, containers, drop-off locations, staffing, outreach, and planning necessary for food scrap collection. Cutting this relatively tiny amount of support for the compost project would be a giant step backwards for the city. Longer term, we need to revisit how DSNY food scrapping is structured.
Time expired.
I believe that the only way to do that is by having mandatory recycling. We could also mandatory composting. Through that we could eliminate a lot of the collection of garbage and save city money out of the way. We also would address the rat problem, a big health issue. Thank you very much for letting me testify. I will be submitting written testimony as well.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Adam Brukowitz, followed by Michael Lampariello, followed by Danette Rivera. Adam?
Starting time.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. I'm Adam Barukis. I run Wearable Collections, a leading clothing and textile recycling company based out of Brooklyn. We've been the backbone of the New York City Green Market collection since 2008. We've grown the collections from 1 market a week to 34 markets per week over that time span. What started out as a proof of concept has grown to be part of the fabric of waste management in NYC. Our company started by placing bins inside of residential buildings to make clothing recycling as easy as plastic, glass, and paper. We've seen that business grow to over 250 buildings citywide. We've also partnered with DOE Office of Sustainability to host clothing drives with over 100 schools. Wherever we believe we can create a convenient collection hub, we seek to operate. There's been no better partner for us than Grow NYC, who has led the way on niche waste management. The green markets have proven to be a perfect hub for waste collection. The collections have grown to around 1 million pounds annually from green markets alone. One might question how important textile collections are to the city. Textiles and clothing make up 6% of the residential waste stream. It's not a gigantic percentage, but significant, 200,000 tons a year. But there is more to the story, which my 15 years of experience has taught me. Clothing is the best gateway material to opening eyes for the value of our waste stream. People understand the value of clothing. They have a good sense of another life that the clothing have when they're done with it through the years of donating clothing. People love to tell stories of the life they lived in the clothing. As a waste manager, specifically of clothing, but well-versed in how other materials are handled, I can see how waste management is very formulaic. It necessitates efficient collections and dot connecting to find value of the materials, making them worth collecting. Considering there's a cost for dumping our garbage, every pound that recyclers keep out of landfills and in motion saves the city money. Once people learn about the value of how clothing's value is kept through efficient distribution, their minds can better translate how materials like plastics, glass, and organics have better lives ahead of them as well when they're finished, and make them consider their consumptive habits in general. We all seek a greener NYC, and textile recycling plays a key role in raising awareness and education of the value of our waste stream. I hope the council can see this and reinstitute zero waste program. I fully support the CORE Act. Thank you.
Thank you. If any council members have questions at this time, they should use the Zoom raise hand function. Seeing no questions, next we'll hear from Michael Lampariello, followed by Sarah Han, followed by Christopher Gaddis. Michael?
Starting time.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Konstancja Malaszyńska, and I'm a sustainability consultant at Two Trees Management, who manages Domino Park in Williamsburg with New York City Parks. I am testifying on behalf of Two Trees Management and Domino Park today, specifically Park Director Mike Lamparello. On June 1st, Domino opened its internal organics processing operation to drop-offs from the public. The decision was made after discussions with local partners, such as North Brooklyn neighbors and our council members Reynoso and Levin, who heard from many distraught constituents. To date, Domino has had 5 two-hour collection windows, and each broke a record set by the previous one. Last Thursday, for example, we collected more in one day than in 3 previous days combined, for a current total of 2,000 pounds from 400 community members. Though well utilized, our mission-driven and privately funded operation is not enough and only highlights the crisis that the SNY budget cuts created. I helped sort through the beautiful, resource-rich community scraps brought to us. We have had repeat visitors from as far as Forest Hills and Queens, the Bronx and Manhattan, who've brought months worth of scraps. We heard from folks who researched and found us to be one of the 3 or so open facilities accepting scraps at no fee. I am as proud of this as I am heartbroken. New York City is a frontline community of a climate emergency, social and racial justice emergency, and a public health emergency. We need to integrate the city's fiscal bottom line with environmental and social costs and benefits to reflect the true cost of inaction on climate and racial justice. Organics recycling may cost us money now, but it will cost us health and lives in the future. For individuals, separating one's food scraps is one of the most practical at-home climate action items. Let's empower our communities to do so with no less than mandatory curbside collection. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Domingo Morales. Domingo, are you there?
Hello?
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Domingo Morales. I'm 28 years old and I was born and raised in New York City. I lived most of my life in New York City Housing Authority, and thanks to the training I received from the New York City Compost Project, I now run the Red Hook Compost Site, which is the largest compost site in the whole country that processes its organics using 100% renewable energy. When I entered this field in 2015, my life was changed. I was determined to become the compost expert, but the transition was difficult. There weren't many people of color in the compost sector. And when I applied for the job with the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, I didn't believe for 1 second I was going to get the job because I lacked 2 main qualifications: a college degree and a driver's license. But thanks to the Red Hook Compost Site, I had 7 months of intense training and I knew more about the compost process than any other applicants. Well, I got the job. And the most exciting thing for me was the fact that I would be able to train other people just like me. And I have. I've trained hundreds of youth in underserved communities, providing them with professional development that gives them a fighting chance at sustainable careers, increasing diversity in the sustainability world. I have been helping to process residential food scraps in the most environmentally friendly way, turning those food scraps into finished compost that have been used throughout the city to rebuild New York City soil. Farmers, gardeners, school gardens, parks, residential gardeners, street trees, and local landscapers get our compost for free. Grow NYC and the New York City Compost Project provide these services all year round. We educate the public about food and environmental injustice. We work with students and adults of all ages and all backgrounds, cultivating a citywide composting culture. In 2013, you, City Council, invested in the New York City Compost Project, and you were able to change the lives of thousands of people. I'm asking that you reinstate the $6.3 million for Grow NYC and the New York City Compost Project before the CORE Act is passed. The CORE Act is a step in the right direction because you now recognize that composting is essential. Composting reduces levels of methane being produced in landfills. It also reduces the amount of waste
Time expired.
in landfills, improving the quality of life for impoverished communities who reside near said landfills. But we have already been doing this work. I ask that you fund and restore the existing programs and use the CORE Act to expand these programs, giving us the ability to serve 100% of New York City. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Jody Colon, followed by Andrea Liske, followed by Jane Selden. Jody.
Starting time.
I'm sorry, did you say Andrea Liske or Jody Colon?
Jody Colon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair Reynoso, Co-Chair Cabrera, Councilmember Powers, and members of the Sanitation Environment Committee, and all the other council members for your work on this. I'm very excited that the CORE Act has kept the composting conversation alive in the midst of COVID and all the budget cuts. I'm Jody Colon from the Bronx, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to offer my expertise and insight to you today. I was a bit surprised to hear you're going forward with the CORE Act as is. Equally distributed drop-off dots don't shape up into social equity when it comes to composting. And I'm speaking from my 23 years of experience out in the community, 18 of them as manager of the NYC Compost Project at the New York Botanical Garden, one of the 7 teams funded by DSNY. It's a community-based program serving nearly 1,000 organizations, agencies, and community groups across the city. That's social equity. Many have said make curbside mandatory, like recycling. Make it mandatory so the building would participate. In the Bronx, they say make drop-offs no more than a half mile away because anything else is too far away. Composting definitely needs to be more convenient, no matter what your income is. In the Bronx, there are 3 to 7 drop-offs in most of the low-income districts. They accept only about 30 to 100 pounds of food scraps, despite being open for hours a week. Bronxites in those neighborhoods don't waste food. They bring food scraps to places and people they care about, the community gardens where they and their neighbors do grow food. It's the same in other boroughs. To be equitable, they need hands-on help, technical assistance, and training to make compost, to grow food and green their communities. I hope you'll amend Intro 1942 to provide real equity. Have it mandate curbside composting within the next 4 years. And until that happens, let it define core sites more broadly so they can be customized to the community's needs. Perhaps staffed or unstaffed food or yard waste drop-offs, or maybe a neighborhood place where experts visit to provide the community with the knowledge, skills, and opportunities they need to make and use compost locally. Oh, wait, that's the mission of the NYC Compost Project. Restore some fiscal year 21 compost project funds, and you've implemented some of CORE. Gain some of what we've lost to COVID. You've saved expertise and infrastructure and full-time green jobs with health benefits and paid time off. You've preserved the connection to the people, places, and partners that you need to start back up again in fiscal year 22. And then you also gave them the time you need to craft CORE to take it where you really want to go. Mandatory curbside composting and customized community composting assistance in people's own neighborhoods. Thank you so much for your time and for all your work on these issues. We appreciate that we've been able to give voice to what the people in the community are telling us.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Andrea Leesky, followed by Jane Selden, followed by Andre Coburn. Andrea?
Starting time.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Andrea Lieske. I have worked with Earth Matter as part of the New York City Compost Project for 6 years. I've educated thousands of visitors to our Compost Learning Center on Governor's Island during workshops, tours, work days, technical assistance, and during center open hours, showing them the miraculous transformation of organic waste into nurturing compost to take care of our soil and plants, illustrating the importance and benefits of composting for the environment, showing them how to participate and teaching them how to compost themselves. As part of the New York City Compost Project hosted by Earth Matter, I've managed the waste operation of many public zero waste events with thousands of visitors and volunteers, enabling them to learn and participate in composting, recycling, and environmental advocacy. Well, I have been let go as of April 6th because of the city budget cuts, but this is not about me. This is about New York City continuing on to address the climate crisis. It's about making the CORE Act an equitable and effective bill. Without education, outreach, and technical support as part of the bill, it will not get there. It is through education and outreach that the word compost has become a household name. And it is this wide outreach, education, and technical assistance that will allow New Yorkers to participate. For some, the best way to participate might be to drop off food scrap at a location. For others, it might be through the technical assistance in their community gardens. And yet for others, it will be through hands-on experiences at compost sites. In-house DSNY staff will not be able to provide this at an adequate level. This work has to continue in tandem with offering New Yorkers the opportunity to drop off food scraps. Please reinstate the funding for community composting and recycling outreach, make it part of CORE, and pass the CORE Act. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We'll circle back to Marissa De Dominicus. Are you still there, Marissa?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Okay.
Starting time.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Council, for this opportunity to speak. I'm Marissa D. Dominicus. I'm co-founder and ED of Earth Matter New York, a nonprofit on Governor's Island. I fully support this Equitable CORE Act legislation that will provide composting and recycling opportunities for all New Yorkers. And thank you, City Council Member Chin, for your suggestion that Governor's Island be expanded as a destination for New York City food scraps. Earth Matter is ready, willing, able to work with all of our Community Compost Coalition partners, the Trust, local bid to increase our local processing capacity and achieve New York City goals. Our Community Composting Coalition, made up of Grow New York City's zero waste programs and the 7 compost projects, has laid off 107 community compost staff people. The fundamental educational scaffolding that New York City needs to ensure that the CORE Act before us today is successfully implemented. They're poof, gone. I urge you to restore the budget, to restore our staff and provide the infrastructure, boots on the ground help needed for our residents to drop off and educate about the future compost drop-offs proposed. Support the support system, critical to help healing the environmental mess that we have made. In 1984, community organizers set up a 24/7 public food scrap drop-off center. I don't know if you can see it, but there's Oscar the Grouch and there's compost bin underneath him. It was located on East 13th Street and Avenue B, adjacent to our Green Thumb Garden. We use the compost on our block street trees, and these ash trees are thriving today. We used it on our garden soils where there was elevated lead levels, and it created a healthier soil. However, my neighbor and garden partner's son, James, at 3 years old, who played in the garden,
Time expired.
for severe lead poisoning that we believe contributes to his long-term health problems today. No family should worry about poor soil damaging their child's health. We request that you restore our funding immediately to show that government works together with constituents and community organizations to solve one of the city's biggest elephants in the room: irresponsible and environmentally devastating waste management practices. Thank you, authors of the CORE Act, council members who support these bills, and especially our council member Chin, for providing a legislative interim solution until mandatory recycling is enacted. Wishing you all health and safety in this difficult time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Jane Selden, followed by Andre Coburn, followed by Jessica Taban. Jane?
Starting time.
First, I would like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to testify today. My name is Jane Selden, and I'm here representing 350 NYC, an environmental activist organization focusing on local NYC climate issues. 350 NYC has joined the Save Our Compost Coalition because we recognize the vital role recycling of organic and non-organic waste plays in confronting the climate crisis. 1/3 of the city's waste stream is composed of organic material. If composted, it has the environmental benefit of sequestering carbon. However, if it enters landfill, it produces methane, a greenhouse gas 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Therefore, we urge the mayor to restore funding for the NYC Compost Project and Grow NYC. With the suspension of curbside recycling, the services they provide will be the only way New Yorkers can divert organic waste from landfill. Shutting down these composting facilities also means even more waste will be trucked to waste transfer stations located primarily in low-income communities and communities of color, where residents are already subjected to unhealthy levels of noise and air pollution. It is these same communities that have often not had access to recycling programs. The CORE Act, sponsored by Council members Powers and Reynoso, would address the inequity by mandating at least 3 organic drop-off sites in every community district, and would also include sites for recycling textiles, which comprise 10% of the city's waste stream. These voluntary community-based programs are important stopgap measures that will keep organics recycling going during the current budget crisis. However, ultimately, we need to restore curbside pickup and make organics recycling mandatory in order to make it cost-effective. 20 years ago, after 9/11, plastics and glass recycling was suspended in the wake of another financial crisis, and the city's recycling rate has never fully recovered. Today, we no longer have the luxury of time in
Time expired.
ensuring a sustainable future. We can't afford to make the same mistake twice. Thank you.
Thank you. If any council members have questions for the previous panel, they should use the Zoom hand raise function now. Next, we'll hear from Andre Coburn, followed by Jessica Taban, followed by Ruth Asa. Andre?
Starting time.
Thank you, members of the committee, Council Member Reynoso, Powers, Cabrera, Brannon, Commissioner, and Borough President. My name is Andre Coburn. I'm from South Queens, the child of hardworking Caribbean immigrants to this country, like my great-grandmother who worked in cloth factories and hotels until she could open our family restaurant here in Queens, a place normally bustling in our community pre-COVID. My great-grandmother had a vegetable garden, a place that lightened the burden of what had to be bought and reminded everyone of the importance of giving back from the environment, giving back to the environment and what it could give to us. I'm a passionate gardener. I'm an explosive canine officer for DHS, and I am a student of the New York City Compost Project's Master Composter Program. I'm here today because although my job calls for me to risk my life to protect the public from threats, today under threat are programs like the one I am part of that bring education and power and change to my community and greener space for so many diverse kids like my daughter and her friends, and they are being cut. Programs like the Master Composter course have changed my life and opened up community gardening relationships for my peers in the community. These programs give opportunities through Grow NYC, New York City Compost Project, Earth Matters, the Lower East Side Ecology Center, the New York City Department of Sanitation, and so many more. Help minorities in my neighborhood talk and form these bonds. We talk about equality a lot today. People like myself asking to be seen. I ask that the council members that serve this city, as well as the mayor of New York, please secure our future and see this need. We do not need another bus depot in South Queens. We don't need more police task force buildings or airport parking lots. We need programs and facilities doing green work.
I think you've accidentally muted yourself. Can we unmute Andre again?
Me, my community, value our community. We need our children to be able to see community engagement with each household in my neighborhood contributing to curbside pickup. Please reinstate organics collections. We have great food in our community, so we have great food scraps. Please support the CORE Act by first keeping the light infrastructure through 1942. My great-grandmother believed in teaching someone to grow, and they will never go hungry. Although she passed away this year, as many New Yorkers unfortunately have, her memory inspires me through this COVID crisis to prepare the earth for our children. Please reinstate New York Community Composting, its budget line, the funds, the education site that helped teach New Yorkers like me and my friends and family and community that processing sites that give right back into our community with outreach and compost empower us to be stewards of the environment by continuing to fund community composting. The infrastructure already in place with New York City Compost Project and Grow NYC is necessary for CORE to be successful. Thank you again, committee members, for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Jessica Tobin, followed by Ruth Asa, followed by Peter Carolini. Jessica?
Time begins now.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I would like to thank first off, Councilmember Cabrera, Councilmember Brannon, and all the other council members for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jessica Tabone. I'm a lifelong resident of the Bronx. I was raised by Spanish-speaking immigrant parents. And back in 2014, I became very interested in this topic of waste management, as I saw that in my community, we were lacking in just engaging in waste diversion. I was trained as a master composter with the NYC Compost Project, and I have volunteered since then at community gardens, events, spreading awareness. I was also fortunate to be hired for a green industry job with the NYC Compost Project. But my job position aside, I am speaking up on behalf of myself and my neighbors. I am advocating for restoration of the $7 million community composting subsidy, which funds the NYC Compost Project in every borough, including the one that serves my neighborhood in Bedford Park. Composting provides ecological, social, psychological, and spiritual benefits. Some of the panelists already spoke about the environmental benefits in terms of metrics. I want to talk about a social perspective, about the community gardeners and urban farmers of all ages and ethnic backgrounds that are already composting food scraps, teachers that attend compost project workshops and go on to create classroom worm bins to show their students that we can reduce waste indoors as well. These students are learning that this same compost can be used to feed the soil of indoor and outdoor plants. These composting education programs foster learning, creativity, self-reliance, and more so, they show our youth that they can dream and dare to improve our neighborhoods, that their education is supported beyond the classrooms in our city's green spaces. So we're already in the Bronx, the NYC Compost Project already engages with business improvement districts such as the Jerome Gunhill Bid and Southern Boulevard Bid to spread awareness of composting and do street tree care events. Homeowners and residents of apartment buildings in the Bronx, such as Amalgamated Housing Co-op, have received composting equipment, guidance, tricks, and encouragement from knowledgeable composting staff. Senior citizens get the opportunity to engage in the physical act of composting in a safe and accessible manner. They are able to contribute their labor, wisdom, and cultural history to the communities. These are some of the same senior citizens that saw these communities burn and but also participated in the rebuilding of our neighborhoods. And their stories have inspired me. And that I'm here to speak up for them, to preserve their years of hard work, to preserve all the advocacy, to preserve all of the education and awareness that has been done in the Bronx, so that children in the Bronx who have already seen their education and school life slip on them can at least have opportunities to learn about composting and learn how they can improve their environment. I guess to close it off, we are faced with a bleak future, and it requires us to reimagine and improve our waste management systems if we are to curb climate change. And we owe this to the youth, we owe it to the senior citizens and all the residents of New York City. And I would like to say thank you to the city council members for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Ruth Asa, followed by Peter Carolini, followed by Nancy Romer. Ruth?
Time begins now.
I'd like to just state a line from the book Picking Up. Garbage is always, we will die, civilization will crumble, life as we know it will cease to exist, but trash will endure. And that's why we need to make compost, not trash. Good afternoon to the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management. My name is Ruth Rivar Isa. I'm an ICU nurse and a master composter. As a Queens resident living in the year 2020, I think it's a shame that I need to speak up about a $7 million city budget cut to an initiative that addresses social, environmental justice, and climate change impacts. On the other hand, I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak up at this committee hearing to reiterate, as those have before me, that the issue of organic waste removal is a priority need for New York City in the name of public health. Throughout the pandemic, I continued to do my part of backyard composting and curbside pickup until it was unfortunately suspended. This past year, I was also a fellow at Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments. In my work this past year, I see a discrepancy that not all neighborhoods in the 5 boroughs are treated equally to have available brown bins for collection, neither are there available drop-off sites. This is a great time to analyze these gaps. This year, in my fellowship program, what I see in New York is a daunting list of inequities. Aside from COVID-19 issues of healthcare access, there's issues of violence, the urban heat island effects, air pollution in Southeast Queens, and the issue of waste transfer stations, primarily in neighborhoods of color. The main issue at the heart of all these disparities was what I realized is the issue irrespective of the borough: social inequality and the lack of resources. Outreach work via zero waste initiatives is invaluable. Rather than back away from healthy initiative preventive actions, such as reducing waste to landfills, we need to enhance organic waste efforts. I believe this can be done by re-implementing curbside collection and promoting invaluable outreach workers. Not only should the city strengthen its efforts on maintaining organic waste removal, it should make it mandatory and widespread throughout the boroughs. It shouldn't stop there either. It should mandate that all essential places of business be held to a higher standard of waste segregation. I've worked at LAJ Medical Center as an ICU nurse for 9 years, and in my whole career have never experienced such chaotic times than what is currently going on with the COVID-19 pandemic. As a frontline healthcare worker, I understand the impact that climate change also has towards long-term public health impacts. It would be counterproductive to retract such invaluable programming and one that truly makes a difference in reducing greenhouse gases such as methane. We need to be mindful as ever of our environment during these uncertain times. It's evident to me that behavior change is a reality. If people can abide by stay-at-home orders and socially isolate, organics waste collection should be made mandatory. I just want to briefly say also that as an ICU nurse, as a holistic nurse, and a fellow at Annie, the organic curbside collection and zero waste initiatives serves as an essential intervention to improving global and planetary health. And I ask that the city restore funding to the community composting, zero waste education programs, and to implement the CORE Act. This past year, I have tabled events voluntarily at my hospital, thanks to Queens Botanical Garden outreach workers and Big Reuse. Without their resources, without their guidance, I would never have been able to do this. And what I came across was a lot of people, a lot of employees who are interested in wanting to do more, in wanting to help improve their environment. At the High School Institute for Health Professions at Cambria Heights, I helped to coordinate a composting educational session with a Queens Botanical Garden outreach worker. And what high school students see from composting goes beyond just collection. It's a method of reducing our carbon footprint and ties into local food growing initiatives. Composting provides a public health need and education, and your support would help me validate this past year's work I've done voluntarily, because I see it as crucial to the future of the youth who will inherit our city. Thank you.
Thank you. If any council members have questions for the previous panel, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Next, we'll hear from Peter Carolini, followed by Nancy Romer. Peter?
Time begins now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for all those who put this together. My name is Peter, and like Jane Selden, I'm a member of the environmental activist group 350 NYC, offering my testimony to why I think cutting the compost program is a huge mistake. For the past year, I've been working for Earth Angel, a company that keeps film and TV sets sustainable and reduces emissions. And part of my job involves redirecting waste into compost. For my time in this position, I've seen the tremendous benefits of compost. Sustainability-wise, compost is one of our best ways to curb emissions and reduce CO2 in the atmosphere. Through our work in the past 5 years, on less than 30 film and television sets, we've managed to take 440 metric tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere from just composting alone. That's a fraction of what I think is achievable should millions of our residents have access to a composting program. On a citywide scale, the work that we could do in reducing emissions could be colossal. And financially, those numbers help in the long run. Like Oliver Wright mentioned, it reduces the cost of truck journeys and the loads of waste in landfill. And also, combating the climate crisis will curb costs in the near future, costs such as seawalls for rising sea levels and costs for migrants displaced by climate, for example. A $7 million budget cut wouldn't save that much more money. As it is, this is still less than 1% of NYC's annual $92 billion budget. Long story short, the cost for compost is microscopic compared to what will be required should the climate worsen drastically. Additionally, getting rid of e-waste pickups is incredibly dangerous, and electronics in landfill is environmentally hazardous beyond compare and has been known to have horrible effects. So having seen up close the benefits of composting, I now ask that the funding for community compost be restored. It is a vital and money-saving process to help our great city contribute immensely to the fight against climate change in a way that most New Yorkers can join in on. And lastly, as a 24-year-old terrified of the future climate crisis, I'm begging you to vote to take whatever measure you can to ensure your descendants have a livable world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Nancy Romer. Nancy?
Time begins now.
Okay, thank you. Peter, thank you for reminding us of the climate crisis looming in front of us that is terrifying people who are aware. And thank you to the City Council members who are advancing composting and those who are advancing a $1 billion cut in the New York Police Department. It's a good start to reimagine what equitable public safety looks like. The People's Climate Movement, New York, started in 2014, developing that massive climate march. And we are a coalition of individuals and organizations committed to mass mobilization for solutions to climate change. We recently sent the City Council a letter signed by 180 organizations on a green recovery, and that's what composting is about. It's part of the green recovery. The People's Climate Movement of New York stands behind saving the composting program that exists right now and asks the City Council of New York to expand that program to make it more self-supporting and ultimately less costly, or to incur no cost to the city over time. Closing down the present composting program will be costly, and starting it up will be even more costly. Composting costs can be covered by expanding the program and making it more self-sustaining. The public outcry for this program can translate into broader education for New Yorkers and effective participation in the composting program now and in the future. Composting sequesters carbon in our atmosphere. Putting food scraps into landfill creates methane. It's a greenhouse gas that's 86 times more potent and dangerous than carbon and creates respiratory illnesses in nearby communities. Because most waste transfer stations and landfill are in low-income communities and communities of color, they will be more affected again. People's Climate Movement asks that the City Council support the restoration of the $7 million in the mayor's budget to support the 170 drop-off and community education sites, as well as funding be restored to at least provide residents and communities with sites to drop off organic waste in the short term and immediate future. We support Intro 1942 and 43, the Core Act, to have equitable organic and textile waste collection sites in each community. What we really need is this mandatory collection for all New Yorkers. We need to slow down the devastating impact of climate change by supporting composting, first in our communities and eventually mandatory curbside. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's anyone who signed on to testify but hasn't been called yet, can you please use the Zoom raise hand function now? If there are any council members who have questions for this past panel, please use the Zoom hand raise function now. Seeing no hands raised, I'll turn this back over to Chair Brannon.
Thank you, Council. Are we all done?
It looks that way, yes.
Okay, this was great. I mean, I'm reminded of that familiar saying that you don't know what you got till it's gone. I mean, the amount of folks who reached out to my office about losing composting was incredible. And it was by and large folks who live in smaller apartment buildings who don't have the space really, but were really, really dedicated to composting. I mean, when composting first came around and we saw the brown bins, people thought they had been dropped from outer space. They didn't understand what they were, and they were sort of resistant to it. But they fell in love with it. They fell in love with food scraps. They fell in love with what this means. They fell in love with what this means for our environment. They fell in love with what it meant for the neighborhood. And it was really cool to see because people really kind of hated it when it first happened. Where the hell am I going to put this bin? What the hell is this? And raccoons are going to go insane. There was all these crazy sort of unfounded fears about it. But people fell in love with it. And once they got to know what it meant, for the larger, environment, it was really cool to see. So the outpouring of support that we got from folks when they heard that because of budget cuts that composting was going to be cut was pretty impressive. It was not what I was expecting. So it's great to see my colleagues, Antonio, Councilman Reynoso, and Councilman Powers are working on something that I fully support to try to get this back, to try to salvage it somehow, to try to salvage composting. So I was happy to step in to this hearing to help chair it and to hear from folks on the ground and to hear folks who were given such an opportunity through these programs, which is a piece that we don't think about a lot. And that this was a program that was quietly very popular, and that people are very upset that it's gonna get cut, and we need to do what we can to try to save it or put something together to keep it going through these harsh budget times. So thank you all so much for testifying today. Your testimony is very meaningful to elected officials to hear what people are thinking across the city. We appreciate you hanging in there. With council, I can adjourn with that. Okay. Thank you. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.